Good evening, everybody. I know I'm late by the usual 7 o'clock standard, but I am at least trying to get within that first hour window. I'm also going to try and make this a little bit more of the sort of the norm moving forward. I did have to had a little bit of just a tough day at work. I was going to call in sick originally, but I was feeling a bit better in the afternoon. But mostly I want to make sure that I'm done reasonably close to the proper time so I can get a full night's sleep. But looks like we're up and ready to go. Oh. Sorry, I don't have my creator dashboard. But we're going to kind of continue on in the same vein as last time. What I sort of got the salon done nice and early for this season. So what I'll be able to do from there is this can really be a time where I focus a lot on the various skills and the books that I want to read to level them up. I'm not ruling out the possibility of the further stories. So we have the book about Maya that we need to give. I think we were going to give Olympi the book there. And then I think we do have a couple of texts that we can give Connie as well. But I'm going to, we'll see. Like I kind of need to see where we're at with my reading. I definitely want to get more of the books read before I start making decisions in terms of things that I hand off to the various characters. And Zero Dree, good to see you. How are you doing tonight? All right, welcome back, Librarian. Everything is remembered. Hush House endures. So it looks like I already had a couple of things that I was working on. So we are leveling up the wolf stories. I also seem to remember I might have already put something in the... Oh, no, apparently I didn't. So I seem to remember in the previous stream I had talked about a bunch of different actions that I wanted to take, but I definitely don't remember them. So let me just take a quick second here. Yeah, I think I was going to write down some to-dos, but I definitely don't have them. Now, if I... So if I look at the memories that I have, we don't have anything in the... we don't have anything that's directly pointing me towards one particular choice over another. The list that I had here would be Wolf Stories, which would be 2 scale or Moon. Path and Pilgrim, which would be 6 scale and or Rose. Stone Stories would be Scale and Nectar. Tradisma Hyra would be Grail and or Moon. Edicts Inviolable would be Heart and or Moon. And then Drums and Dances, which would be Heart and or Nectar. So it looks like there is a bit of a crush for Scale. This suggests to me that I should probably be focusing on the Moon side, but of course on the Moon side, that is one that a number of the other... That's one that a number of the other... Okay, this is an easy one for us to do. But yeah, there's Scale is kind of demanded by a few of them. And one thing that's worth keeping in mind for myself is that, well, I can kind of say that Scale is wanted by a number of them. For Path and Pilgrim, the Scale and Rose, that becomes quite difficult, because if you look at the other options, so Surgeries and Exsanguinations, Desires and Dissolutions, Glass Blowing and Vessel Crafting, a lot of these are knock. The actual number of sort of Scale and Rose items are quite limited. I guess even the Radical Measure, I think. Oh no, that does give us Rose. Okay. So we might be able to do something with that. And then of course we start running into challenges in the sense that, we actually need to we need to actually be able to read some of these texts. Definitely at the higher levels, these become a challenge. Now, another thing that I can do, we have towards a fundamental aesthetic. So I guess the question would be, what would I do with glass blowing and vessel crafting, which I believe is a Nock and Sky text. So what I want to look at here would be any skills that I want to level up that I don't yet have. Actually, glass blowing and vessel crafting itself would be a good one to level up. So Edict's Liminal has the Nock side, but we've already got the 8. In fact, I should be making a note for that. So essentially our whole Nyctodromy path we have taken care of. Sort of invites the question why I haven't committed them yet, but I can... Actually, yeah, let's start with that. I don't know, actually, sorry, because it's lore stuff, I think I'll wait until I'm a little bit further into the session just to give people a chance to hear the new ideas. So for Hushery, we want Inks of Revelation at level 7, then Glass Blowing and Vessel Crafting at level 8, and then Quenchings and Quellings, which is already at level 9. So that we've already worked out. For Hormacistry, Drums and Dances would be the next one. So we've already said how that one will need 5 Heart and Nectar. Now that one is a somewhat high priority skill to level up, just because it does give me access to a couple of interesting memories which I can't get somewhere else. But we're also somewhat short on Heart and Nectar memories, so there's a little bit of tension there. For Ithistry, we are moving up to Pyroglyphics at 6. I may be a little worried that I don't see it here. Oh yeah, here we go, 2. Okay. So for that we would need 4 memories. This one's kind of nice because it's Lantern and Forge, so I have a little bit of an idea of some of the things that I could use for it. So for instance, we have Deoris Book 2, so Disciplines of the Hammer would give me a Forge to work with on that one. And then for Skolakosophy, we've got Rhyme and Remembrance to 5 now. The next one would be Orchids and Narcotics to 6. Okay, and then that one is actually eating into a couple of the memories that I want for other things, which would be Grail. So I think our best bet right now would be to nab a couple of moon texts to handle the wolf stories. And then maybe from there, we think about how we can level up Path and Pilgrim. So the Queens of the Rivers would be a good example of one that I want to read right away. So that will take straight to the Pale Desk. And because it accepts Lantern, what I can do here is we got the Queens of the Rivers. We can use the Whist. And then really I just need to find a skill with the relevant scale. So Coil and Chasm is an option. But so is Horns and Ivories, and in fact Path and Pilgrim is enough. So there we go. I can master this mystery, enough scale to match mystery scale. Looking for the moon is a little bit more tricky. So for instance, with Intimations of the Skin, we have Desires and Dissolutions. Desires and Dissolutions is currently at 3, but I believe we want to take that. Oh no, sorry. That was one that we weren't going to take higher. However, the Grail is quite desirable for this one right now. So if I can avoid using something with Grail that still has Moon, I'd like to take that opportunity. So Pentiments and Precurses is another example of a tricky one, so that one would be appropriate for something like Path and Pilgrim. Although I'm actually thinking that my Path and Pilgrim might be overstated. Let me just see where that falls on the list. I don't see this anywhere on the list. Makes me wonder if I've already committed it. Nope. So it's a Nyctodromy or a Birdsong. So what's the story here? So Nyctodromi, it would go, we have Edicts, Liminal, and Coil, and Chasm, so that would say to me it's a bird song. Oh, here we go. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. So I said 6, but we have 4 levels already, and we want to take it to 8, so we actually just need the 4. Or technically 3 now that we're reading that one book. Okay. So yeah, I think my focus is still going to be on trying to find some moon. Okay, so Sickle and Eclipse is a perfect example of this. I think we're actually just going to go ahead and run with that one. We should have Vac now, and I should have... it might take a little bit of effort to get the... Oh no, because we've got Edicts Martial. Yeah, so... Observations on the Peacock Door. So we'll use that at the Vagabond desk. Vac, before gods arose from blood, before ever apes stood upright, this was the language heard in the House of the Sun. I am Vac, the Peacock Door boasted, both the tongue and the goddess. I am the only entrance into secret light. I was worshipped before you upright apes, and I will still be when all of you are ugly ash. Listen, and I will prove it. So, if I want, I can try and bring sort of a 9 moon and then add a tryst. The only thing is I don't think I actually have a 9 moon. The closest I have is Trides Mahaira. Well, and then I could add the... what was I trying to say? I could add the Lunar Globe, but this makes sense. Okay, so that should take care of the wolf stories. So if I'm looking for 3 for Path and Pilgrim, and that's looking for a combination of scale and rose, let's think about what kinds of scale we can get. So again, I'm not opposed to pentiments and precursors here, but it might be something that I can use elsewhere. I'm looking for a total of 4. Is Inks of Power... Yeah, Inks of Power has already been taken care of. So Red Book of Brittany would open some possibilities for me. I'm not so sure about my current rose level, though. Yeah, so easier said than done. I've got 5 to start with. That can go up to 7 with the FET. And then I can probably get... Well, I know for sure I can take that up to 9. But that's still 3 away. There might be a little bit that I can... Okay. What kind of... Oh, you know what I can do? I can probably just get a horizon sight from the Stimfling. So, offer this beast my company, who knows? Perhaps it will offer something in return. So that should get me 3 of the 4 that I need. And I think I'm going to leave it there just because I'll probably want to make some decisions after. Now, let's think about the other matter. So if I'm going to be leveling up wolf stories, that will be 2 trysts that I want. And then for Path and Pilgrim... See, the thing is, I would ideally like to use my health for gardening. We've got plenty of honey, actually. Yeah, I think for a start, we're gonna gobble up whatever vegetables we can get our hands on. And then what I'll do is I'll use the health, I'll use the water to restore the health so that I can use that to level up. We can do the same with the sweet bones, obviously, but... As far as your I'm noticing every time I glance over, I think there's a new message, but it's just your delightful emotes. Okay, orchids and narcotics. And herbs and infusions. Maybe as a precaution, I'll use the core to drop some water, although we already have quite a bit. And then for summer, so moth orchids in spring, honey scar jasmine in autumn, fragrant chalice in summer and autumn, Latin rose in winter, agave eterna flowers here in summer, trumpeter's lily in, well, let's go at least for one of the history plant. It's all kind of winding up on the bridge anyway. Not my favorite choice, but it's one I've gone with. Okay. So, got 2 of the wolf stories leveled up. Let's keep going to Crowcross Sands and the moor. Oop. What is the sea seeded today? And then get some crafting stuff from the moor. The wind's almost warm. And so in theory I'm going to set aside this 3 fet, although ideally we would turn that into something else. So yeah, we can use the sweet bones, help with letters. I could offer help with correspondence and arithmetic. There's no school in Brandkrug and not everyone here knows their letters. On that note, so the perilous path. Oh yes, so I should have been thinking a little bit about the rows that I might be able to use. Although I think I said I might just wait on opening any further rooms. Olaf, it is lovely to see you as always. I know my start time has been pushing out, further and further. And that is really a big work thing. I'm sure you can imagine the Canadian government is going through some things right now. And I know you just recently had your own democratic exercise. And I know some people are have opinions about the choice. But I'm really, really happy to see you. As actually, every time I've wanted to stream on time, it's usually been because I think I definitely think about you and your intro messages. So just let me know on a fairly tough day. You have actually made me very, very happy. Thank you very much for pushing the button there, Olaf. Again, like I said, it's always good to see you. I don't want to be too mushy. I don't want to overstate it, but yours is a name I'm always very happy to see inside of the channel. And I know it has been a while since we've been able to interact, so I wanted to really take the time and say thanks. And it's nice to see you. I hope you are doing well. Okay, so the question really is how I want to spend these remaining elements of the soul. Definitely opening up the remaining containers is a fairly high one for me. And I think maybe a little bit later through the day I might try a few other things, but I think right now I'm just going to sit on my existing tasks and wait until I've sort of read all the books that I wanted. Right now I think we're only reading the 1, but we'll follow up with the Red Book of Brittany in about a minute. Or sorry, we're reading 2 now. You're doing good. You can imagine. Feels like a good while since I've been here. Yeah, well, I mean, this is entirely my fault, right? Because my usual, I try where I can because I know there's going to be some variance in my streaming schedule. Um, I've been trying to at least keep within that hour of the usual 7 o'clock start. And the fact of the matter is, there are times where I've been starting stream at the time I would normally be finishing, which of course means that I'm finishing at 2 in the morning. And there are some consequences for that, just in terms of how I'm feeling at work. Very often, what this will sometimes mean is I wind up, staying at work a bit later to try and catch up on, on work. Or if I sleep in, there's the challenge that comes from wanting to make sure that I catch up on all the material. And it just creates this cycle where I wind up, I wind up sort of drifting in terms of the schedule, and there isn't really a great way to get back. So it's something I'm conscious of, and it's something I'm working on. One of the practical realities is just my work hours and the fact that it takes me about an hour to commute. So starting at 7 sharp really requires everything to sort of fall into place. And on top of that, I still do stuff like the writing. I still try to make sure that I'm taking care of all of the different things that I want to, although I'll admit that exercise has kind of dropped off. Usually try and do that in the morning, but it's also the first thing to get lost in the morning if I do something else. But it's just one of these things where I'm quite conscious of, there's sort of consequences for not having that consistency in terms of time, and it's not necessarily in terms of audience growth, but it's just the simple chance to be able to interact with people that I like hanging out with. So I'm thankful that you still think of the stream, because I know it's been a while since I've done a cast that you can watch. Of course, with that in mind, I know the various social networks are going through some upheaval, and people have different preferences, but if there is a better way to get in touch with you, if you ever just want to hang out or if you just want to have a chat, obviously I'm available on Discord. I think DMs still work on Twitter. If not, there's all sorts of other ways to get in touch. All right, let's keep going. The skill is now level 5. Its power aspects have also increased. So we won't read the wolf stories quite yet because we've got a couple of other levels to bring up on that. I suppose one thing that I can do is prepare for the higher levels. In fact, I should probably be bringing some characters in at this point. So we'll bring in Mr. Kill, because we'll be finishing with the Stimfling reasonably soon. And if I need 5 moon or scale, there's definitely a few books that I can read that give me both. So hindsight will give me some scale. Intuitions is something that Mr. Kill may give me. As is fear. Oh, but so is hindsight. Yeah, I kind of messed that up. All right, doesn't matter. All right, so let's take. I think we're on to an Exorcist Field Manual. So contradiction is definitely something that I can't get from Mr. Kill. Foresight, Gossip, Salt does give Moon. So let's do the Sea. I think I did the Sea does not regret, but I'll read it again just to be sure. Definitely can get a confounding parable, so I think we're on to... Actually don't remember which one we were on to. And then the Savage Hymn is one that we can work with as well. Although I think I skipped Natan's desk, we can use a shaft there. But I think that's everything that we can work with for the wolf stories. I could try and get some rows for Path and Pilgrim. but I think all of the unique rows that I can get has already been taken care of. So I think we'll just leave it there. I imagine I'll probably need to get a few more elements of the soul before. Okay, that's fair. And again, I don't mean to sound too needy. Obviously, you have your own life and your own interesting things that you're doing, but I don't know, everyone, it's just kind of nice, when you've known people for a while on a platform, it's just nice to be I occasionally think, oh, it's been a while since I've seen a few regular names. And it's always a little bit of a tricky one, right? Because there are some people who were quite regular in the stream, and either there's the change in format, I do less grand strategy than I used to, or they may not find it as interesting as before. There's lots of different reasons why people may or may not still be with the channel, and so I always want to be a little careful too in terms of reaching out so that people don't feel like they're being checked up on. Because it's one of these cases where you always want to be grateful for the time that you have spent with people, but you don't want to create some awkwardness in terms of, how people depart. And that can be a hard one, right? I think very often, certainly when I was moderating, and I, even recently on this stream, like if people stop coming, it can very often be because of a negative interaction on one or both parties' sides. And my hope is always that it doesn't have to be that way, but it's sort of like, it's like any kind of interaction with someone. Like, you don't always know what your last interaction with, a friend from school is going to be or something like that. But I do just tend to notice the nature of Twitch has very often been that, when people leave communities, there's sometimes, like, so a good example I can take of this is quite a well-known streamer. It was like one of the first streamers that I really kind of got into, and it was the first one that I subbed to, actually. And I didn't necessarily think their that their stuff was bad, but I definitely kind of got the impression that there were sort of two tiers of the community. That there was a certain, they did it well. I mean, it was their living, right? So they definitely wanted to make it so that the subs sort of got that extra step. But it did sort of feel like, in terms of the way the subs talked amongst each other, there was sort of two different tiers of subs. And I did find it very hard to sort of feel integrated in the community. And in the end, I just sort of felt, I never had a single, like, clear negative interaction inside of it. And yet I always sort of felt that I kind of feel like a bit of an outsider here. And I feel like it's been, a year, and I don't think this is ever going to change. And that did sort of cause a bit of a shift. There were a couple of other things that happened, too, just in terms of overall tone and sort of the way they sort of talked with their chat in general, which started to get to a point where I was like, okay, I'm maybe a little less comfortable with the direction that this has gone. But it was never, like, there was a clear moment where it's like, okay, I don't think I'm getting the value out of the sub here, so I'll stop the sub, but I'll still occasionally tune in. And then gradually over time, I just sort of found that there wasn't the same, I didn't feel the same need, and I didn't have the same enjoyment of watching. And then, so I just kind of, eventually one day, I realized that I hadn't watched in months, and I was like, hey, you know what, I can just unfollow. And, that was that. Nobody missed me when I was gone, and, there was no, it's not an airport, right? You don't announce when you're departing. But especially as a mod, I've definitely seen some cases. Usually it's some version of the, like, don't you know who I am kind of response. And, even something like a timeout. This is actually one of the reasons why I don't post rules. I've seen more, like, simple timeouts of, like, hey, just cool it for a bit, this isn't how we do things here. It's far more frequent for those to turn into permanent bans because of the way that people react to it. the initial timeout. Like to a point that it's mildly depressing, right? Like where you kind of feel like, okay, this person's not going to take a timeout well, so it is a de facto ban. But I also think it's really important to like be consistent in that, because there's also a certain type of behavior which will like consciously or unconsciously, they sort of know that there is that fear, and so it sort of allows people to get away with something which wouldn't normally be tolerated from others. And I think if you are going to put a rule down, you do want to be consistent in its enforcement. Otherwise, I think people will have some legitimate complaints in terms of how it works. And again, everybody's channel is different. Everybody gets to set their tone, right? There are some people who can do backseating quite well. I know for me, it's immediately the thing that will make me feel bad about streaming, and it'll really affect the quality of the broadcast. So it's something that I am annoyingly strict about. But I also don't think it's inconsistent with what I've seen in a lot of different channels. So I also don't think I'm being completely unreasonable with it. But again, you do what you can, right? But I do sort of wish, and I think this is just going to be how, I think this is just sort of both online communities, and then I also just think a general tone in the world now. It does sometimes sort of feel like this is just the moment that we're in, and it would be nice if people behaved differently, but we just kind of need to accept that this is how the world is currently structured, and hopefully you can sort of make the gesture towards better behavior. I don't know, though. All right, satisfy this creature's appetite. Food will make a hungry beast or a wild one cooperative. So let's see if we can turn this Horizon site into a lesson. Oh dear. All right. So we're going to read the Red Book of Brittany. And the best rose that I can throw at it is my Inks of Power. So then, yeah, we're good. So we add the Horizon site. On a clear autumn day, the story goes, you can see Ys from the Watchman's Tower. I don't know whether that's true, but on a clear day in Numa, you would see the city unbuilt. Dr. Brian Levinson. So here it's just as well that I didn't use the the lunar globe for the moon, because we wouldn't have been able to do this for the rose. And beyond a little bit of sort of feeding and memory harvesting from Mr. Kill, I think today's going to be all about reading books. Oh, I should have restored rather than... Okay, well, it's too late now, but I will make sure that I bring back 2 elements of the soul. Perhaps I will bring back a tryst for the... Oh, no, we only need 2 for the wolf. Okay, The Hissing Key, an account of the ascent of the hour called the Mother and Ants by the Bossk scholar Mek of the Theban branch of the House of Leith. Mek is not sympathetic to the Mother of Ants, who he calls the Milk Thief. He reviles her for her part in the death of the 7 coils, which he presents as a treacherous conspiracy. The Milk Thief conspires with the Legion Echidna and the hour-to-be called Chiliarch, now more generally rendered as Colonel, to unseam the 7 coils with feathers and drown her in salt. The Colonel thus ascends to hour status. The jealous Milk Thief, once the Colonel's priestess, seduces Echidna into lending her the Hissing Key to enter the Mantis through the Savage Door, beginning her own ascent to name and ultimately hour. So yeah, I'm running the risk here that Mr. Kill will overwrite that. The Sea does not regret Eason Fekri, one-time Secretary Salvant of the Curia of the Isle, responsible for the Curia's healing efforts, writes of his experiences in Brankrug and hints at his travels elsewhere. The sea does not regret the tide, Fekri writes, for when the tide is past, it leaves its traces on the sand, which traces are the sea's memory. Fekri is a keen fisherman and speaks glowingly of the fish suppers of Brankrug. He also admits that his enthusiasm for the bounty of the sea has altered him, that before he came to Brankrug he consumed only those things found in the earth. I was the greater thereby, but all of us give up what we were to become what we are. Oh, as an aside, because we are sort of talking about old and previous channels, Olaf. Your job is definitely not messenger, but I know we met through a mutual friend, and it's been a very long time since I have seen a broadcast or seen this individual. And I don't know if I'm really close enough to be able to say, hey, I hope everything's going all right, because I just kind of assume that they may have moved on from Twitch, or at the very least are enjoying an extended break. But if you are in touch, do at least, offer a hello from me if you get the opportunity. And if you are equally out of the loop, please don't feel the need to do so. An Exorcist's Field Manual, a practical guide to the troublesome dead, grounded in theory, but with a clear focus on their disposal, by the redoubtable detective Ostiary Wheelock of the Suppression Bureau. I keep pronouncing this a little bit strange. So the role is Detective Ostiary, and the last name is Wheelock. We don't know which of the Wheelocks, but I keep pronouncing this strangely. So, by the redoubtable Detective Ostiary Wheelock of the Suppression Bureau. The dead usually avoid light as the most immediate manifestation of eternity, which has no place for death. However, those dead uplifted by gold, that is to say touched by an actinic theoplasma, happily bought about in daylight and are perhaps strongest at noon. If you are dead but uplifted by green, that's the Ring-Use blessing. The crown growth offers a similar but nastier benefit. This is how burgeoning risen come about. But there are different degrees of sentience and freedom depending on which growths are involved. The consciousness of one uplifted by green is always greatly altered, though. They never really seem like the same person. They may have dregs of their original souls, but these are often replaced by something else. The upshot, invariably, is that they need to be set firmly on fire. Yes, particularly in this game, because I know for the longest time I said intercalate instead of intercalate. And the nice thing is that I now have access to a proper Oxford English dictionary through, also welcome, Estini, or S, yeah, actually, for you, this is probably a double meaning in terms of pronouncing things. Astieni? Anyways. But yeah, so where I can, sometimes the VPN doesn't properly work, but that usually will give me a fighting chance in terms of pronunciation. But, the thing is so many of these are terms that I'll only know through reading. And so if it's, my understanding has probably grown from when I first understood. So, usually when you see certain CHs, you can make a best guess in terms of whether it's a ch or a k, depending on certain circumstances. So I'm assuming it's Keone of Abydos as opposed to Chione. However, I should say that the cat's names are Sulo and Chi, so I may not know. Yeah, so this is one actually. So I don't know if I can get it on here. Maybe Wiktionary? For sure. Well, especially too because some of these are. I know on, usually on Twitter, the creative lead would sometimes put sort of some made up terms and what they might mean, or sometimes it would be a combination. So I remember one of the earlier ones, I think during the Kickstarter, was which one of these is the real occultist, or which of these is the Oh, sorry, let me just take a quick sec. Sorry, I just got a very nice message from somebody, and I just wanted to follow up really quickly. Yeah, so just it's actually a broadcaster who I knew, someone who I had a huge respect for, and I know they'd gotten married, but yeah, they just shared a photo of their kid, and I wanted to make sure that I let them know. Thank you so much for letting me know. Anyways, but yeah, so so you make the point here. So some of them are made up, but they draw very clear meanings from their word parts. So like a perfect example of this would be oh, I've got iotic essence, but do I have, there we go, xanthotic essence, right? So as far as I can tell, there is no xanthotic essence, but for something to be xanthic means yellow, or a certain type of yellow. And so, there's a very clear, and I do happen to know from the conversations and just the different releases from the team behind this, the language really is one of the real passions, right? So, I've actually probably gotten a little bit more into linguistics and etymology as a result of the as a result of playing these games. But it's just one of these ones where you can really feel, it come across in terms of that being an interest. And also here, right, like you have all of these different languages that are, made up, but not exactly. So, Deep Mandaic was also inside of Culta Simulator. And, if you know who the Mandians are, I think I originally found out about the Mandians because of the I think they're sort of the only sort of surviving Gnostic sect in sort of that's survived to today. So Deep Mandaic itself doesn't exist, but sort of the spiral bowls that are referred to in Culta Simulator, those are actually on display in a museum in Ontario. I'm sure there's more museums. I just happen to know that that's a more local one. Some of them are sort of already indicate. So when we talk about Arecapean, right? And Pean, of course, has its own meaning. A language of surpassing beauty and elusiveness revealed through the ecstatic apprehensions of the Orphics, the Eleusinians, and the Sibyls of the Rhine. So technically, the Orphics, the Eleusinians, these are not necessarily languages, but these are definitely things that exist, right? The Eleusinian mysteries. I think during Old World, we actually talked about a figure who sort of was this massive sort of Greek troll, and one of the things he did was just reveal the Eleusinian mysteries. I guess you could maybe make the analogy of sort of revealing the top levels of Scientology, and of course that eventually turning into some things like South Park episodes and things like that. It's a crude comparison, but I think there's a bit of an idea in terms of where you might be able to draw a comparison. And then actually one that I always thought was kind of fun. So we have Ramsund here. So my original read that I got on this language has been called Mantik Altair and Lengua Aukel and the Speech of Birds and Ramsund and the Hazelnut Tongue. But it's the language of secrets, and its true name may never be used. The aviform hours use it at their roost, or so the story goes. So when you kind of look at the writing, I thought it was like, oh, this is actually kind of funny, right? You've got the language of birds, and I guess it's a little bit of chicken scratch. But what I didn't realize was that there is actually, I guess, an alchemical tradition, or at the very least some kind of occult tradition that actually talks about, it may be the language of birds. Let me just see if I can find this again on the Oracle. Yeah, the language of birds. So I think this actually has it may even go so far as sort of the practices of augury. Where I had first heard about it, I think was in reference to John Dee, sort of the mathematician and occultist. But again, like it's one of these ones where the deeper you go, and I mean, there's other ones too. So like Vac, I always kind of assumed was this kind of this hypothesized common ancestor for the Indo-European languages and such. And again, knowing that is an interest of the developers, it's, you can see how this would be something that is very carefully thought through, even if in the end, for us, these might just be sort of nice little fun details. The other one for me would be Hyksos, which was an actual people as well. So you can kind of make the same claim with Mandaic, I suppose. But This would be, well, actually, I mean, it more or less describes it right here. This tells you who the Hyksos are as well as this language. The shepherd kings brought this speech west from Canaan to use in their wards and snares. Had they never come to Egypt, they might never have found a way to write it. Given its addictive qualities, that might have been for the best. But yeah, again, the invented words, the made up languages, there's a lot of fun little things to sort of scratch under the surface, and it's one of the rewards where, you know, if you do take the time with, oh yeah, sorry, I was going to look up intercalate. Yeah, sadly, it just has the IPA. I could never read these on their own, but anyways, so again, getting into the etymology of these things as well, it is interesting when you have intercalo, which refers to insertion, and of course the idea of inserting new times into the calendar and such, and the idea of the division of the sun being the intercalate. It is, I don't know, like obviously it's neat to go under the surface and just sort of see how all of these things sort of hang together. They can't, like, the really interesting thing about this is so much of this stuff actually just works at surface level. If you don't know what you know, if you only know of the intercalate as an event that happens in the Secret History setting, and you only took it as a division of the sun, it's still an interesting story. But obviously its relation to time, and specifically the hours. And in fact, I believe there's a specific significant date that is associated with the intercalate. I need to double check where I got that impression from. But that also has like a particular, there's a particular sequence of events that actually gives a special meaning to that event, which again, you can enjoy the game without knowing, but once you do know it, it's just one of these things where to me, what it does, it's a little bit like Book of Hours, which I think highlights this feature very well. Once you learn that there was a little bit more going on, so a perfect example would be when we were talking with Oswin Miao, she'd seen a reference to Red William once before, and I sort of said, do you want to know a little bit more? And then we read the description of the Hermit Cell, and there's a bit more of an expansion in terms of Red William and the role that he played and the implications that this has for the DeWolfs. Again, it's one of these things where you go back to things that were once familiar, and you get to appreciate them in that new light. And so I think the fact that you can do that in the real world for this game is one of the real rewards. It's actually also why, for those of you that, I don't want to spend too much time sort of giving the more meta discussion of the game, but for those of you that are interested in this stuff, I will just mention that Weather Factory does have 2 books, which can either be purchased electronically or you can get a physical copy. I think you can even still get a signed physical copy on the Etsy store. But they have, there's the Against World Building and Other Provocations. And so that's a collection of Alexis Kennedy's essays. And not all of them are going to be about, necessarily are going to be about game design. Clearly Against World Building would be one of those. But if you want something specific about developing games, The Snare of the Tree is... actually, let me just double check that I got the title right. So I don't want to. I'll leave this for your own reflections, but I believe, if I recall correctly, the specific intercalate referred to here actually also coincides with an eclipse, like a real world event that happened, which is related to what you're talking about. And I believe at that same time there was an eclipse. So adds another, yet another dimension to it. But yeah, so I did get the title wrong. So the book was called "The Snare of the Tree and Other Perilous Seductions: Essays on the Dangers of Game Design." So for those of you that are interested in this, I think Against World Building and Other Provocations is just a good set of essays, and I enjoyed reading them. I enjoyed reading them the first time I read them, and I was very happy to have them as a collection to read. So I definitely feel that it's something that it's worth reading on its own. But for those of you who are particularly interested in design, and of course if you're interested in design, probably you are interested in specifically some of the ideas that the developer of this game has on design, I can definitely recommend that one as well. And again, I think you could probably get the two as a bundle, but I leave that to the Etsy store. All right, it is written. Musgrave, fourth of the DeWolf line, writes tentatively about the Covenant of Brankrug and the legacy of the sacred inks he calls Incasta Potentialia. As the light passeth through a prism into many colors, so the great ink separateth into the lesser inks, and the lesser inks into inks minor. Musgrave coyly refuses to talk of the great inks, or else refuses to admit he doesn't know much about them. He insists that Ugol and Stargol, which can be mixed with a sufficient nectar or sky aspect, are sufficient for most befitting purposes. Another thing I'll actually also say too, and this has always been hard for me to escape, but for a while I was sort of entertaining this idea that one of the divisions in terms of the game was a passage through the history of English literature, because it is like a game about books and such. So you see, in the Sweet Bones, if you buy beer, it says, in the time of the Heptarchy, a ring giver was accounted generous, and these times beer buyer is afforded the same consideration. So this would be the ring giver. This you see a lot inside of Beowulf, and you have all of these different periods, right? You have the Dawn period, the Solar Gothic period, the Curia, and the Nocturnal. And I kind of got this feeling when I was picking up my old Norton anthology and reading. And of course, the drawback here is that because so much of English literature I've appreciated through the Norton anthology, which is chronologically ordered, and in the end, that literature is going to reflect the history of, the region that it comes from. It's, sort of hard to see whether or not this is deliberate, or this is just kind of the way that the history winds up working. And because the game does actually, worry about the history of the region, it just winds up being something of a coincidence. But again, there's enough literary references inside here that it can be, at the very least, defended. And of course, it gives you a nice excuse. So for me, I probably should be ashamed that I didn't realize that's at the time, but the Grub Street Opera, Henry Fielding, and the names Scriblerus Secundus. So obviously through Jonathan Swift, I'm very, very big fan of the Scriblerus Club. And I had the purple text on the Henry Fielding entry before. I just didn't make the connection in terms of the Grub Street Opera from this, but it's definitely another one for me to read and appreciate. And again, the more you read, the more you kind of get out of these games. And I think the same would probably be true for the various sort of flowers and lines on botany, because I know there was a really long time with Cultist Simulator where all of the patch notes were some kind of flower, and then I think there were also some types of stone. And I don't think that those were coincidental. The Singlefoot Songs. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Huashan, near the Grove of Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which he suggests causes harm only when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices, powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoots sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. Crack open the container. Delight in your discovery. A glinting cranial tchotchke. We all of us come to this condition in the end, but not all of us are fortunate enough to be lovingly buffed and fixed carefully to a stylish wooden stand. I wonder if there's room in... No. Alright, well I still have other packages that I can open, so we've got this one taken care of. We'll work on these next. It's a little bit of a shame that I'm doing this because it does... I'm competing with my desire to also level up the different skills, but I can... Like I said, I've got a big, wide open month, so... That's a good question, actually. So it looks like they have, for me, I don't know if this was related to some kind of a mystery or something. I know, you know, obviously there's lots of references to eggs, but it does seem, at least since I've, the last few patches, I've noticed that they're absent. I was never able to quite, like, figure that out. But yeah, in terms of all the ones that I have in this playthrough, and this has been going since the beta for House of Light, the Glinting Cranial Tchotchke and the standard Cranial Tchotchke, both don't have the egg aspect. Ooh, apples. Okay. Basket of apples, notoriously hard to take just one bite. Mackerel, eat it while it's fresh or keep it while it's salted. Agave eterna, the history plant, unlike its cousin, the century plant, blooms every year. Perhaps it will do so forever. A little water splashes on the stones of the well to nourish the mosses there. So I think we'll restore... I guess it's the health that I wanted to restore. Carrots, tomatoes, marrows, and blessed onions, all the unsung heroes of the stew pot. Pluck the grapes from the vine. Okay, so I did it this way specifically so that I could get the health back in time to use with my my upgrades. And I think we're good. Yeah, part of it was just I noticed that I was spending more and more time, like, so I do have some shelf space for all of these things, but there was just a certain point at which I noticed I was spending more time searching the house for places to put things. So what I largely do here, if I need a winter or edge, I'll take some of the quartz or the sand and I'll just chuck it out. But because I'm also getting a bit of a hoard for the different flowers, I figured I'd just start using the bridge as a super shelf. This is the only playthrough where I've ever done that, but again, it's just because I've been spending this extra time in the session. All right, The Queens of the Rivers, a surreal contemporary play by the enigmatic Monica Medina, in which the Queens of the Rivers are murdered one by one. The Queen of the Vistula is poisoned, the Queen of the Dnieper chokes on a fishhook, the Queen of the Tagus is burnt alive. The culprit, it transpires, is the audience. The surviving queens are directed to execute whatever audience members do not escape. A surprisingly lucid epilogue suggests that the correspondence of river names with historical events does provide clues to secret histories behind our own. Well, I did on the Reddit way back when. I did actually write a sarcastic... Well, actually, you know what? It's been a while since I've read this, so... So this is over a year now. Oh, there's still still post insights. Why is everyone wasting time with shelves? Sorry, I've been watching the YouTube people who probably didn't even pay for the game, and this is really bugging me. Everyone just seems to be wasting so much time fiddling around where to put books on shelves instead of playing the game, and it's really annoying. Shouldn't you just leave it as a big pile outside the Keeper's Lodge? It's way more optimal. Reasons. 1. There's a button right at the top of the screen to go to the bridge. Cultist Simulator made you click and drag your job into the work slot, which was a real drag, and Book of Hours fixed this by giving you that button. Why are people volunteering to click and move individual jobs again? 2. With enough books, most of them stay dry during the rain because they're covered by the others. Oh, but I want all of my books to stay dry, I hear Mr. YOLO Swag 42069, who knows nothing but how to get to 10 million viewers, say. Well, sorry, but sometimes enough is enough. Also, it's disrespectful to the design. There are 4 different places you can dry out a book. If you only dry out your journal, you are literally leaving all of those other ones unused, apparently for the entire game. 3. It's not just faster to navigate with the hot button above, but you don't waste all the time with, oh, should I read this one? Should I read that one? Choices. It's a book. They all have words in them. You don't go, oh, I want that individual tea packet. The leaves look more like snowflakes than that one. Just pick one from the pile and read it if you have to. 4. It's easy mode for getting through all the books you find. Just fill your inventory with chairs, and every time you hit collect, it automatically puts the books in the pile. It honestly doesn't get any simpler. Anyway, sorry about the rant. There's so many more reasons, but I can't be the only one to have discovered that a big pile of books outside the Keeper's Lodge is the best system. Now, it is now 76% of an upvote rate because this is now listed as fan work, but prior to it being listed as fan work, this had a perfect 50-50 split in terms of the upvote rate, to which I will say... Hey, Thunderclap Sasquatch. This is just a silly post that I did when the game first came out, saying that the optimal shelving system was just to put a big pile of books on the bridge. So eventually, the developer did go and was like, "I have flared this as fan work, you villain." But there were definitely some, like, one of my favorite replies by far was from Godier. This man is the best librarian I've seen. Fire him immediately. Yes, Paladin trustees come to visit to see how their new librarian is doing. Sees a mountain of soggy books blocking the... Actually, just in case, I feel, because there's upvotes and downvotes, let me just take a quick minute here and see if I can put this in a private window. I don't think I downvoted anybody, but just in case... like somebody thinks something from a mission is taken the wrong way. Oh, this one I like. So, Corian, stuff gets wet? Wow, I'm almost through my 2nd year and I didn't even notice that. Of course, I just dump all these extra rocks in the sea, so... I had no idea. I was wondering why the piece retained the possibility of drying things out when it's only used at the beginning of the game. So now I feel... now I feel really bad that new people are thinking that stuff can get wet again. I ate one of the books off the Kukurbit Bridge and got tetanus. Explain this right now. This one I thought was very amusing. So there's the Raven Child. Not everyone plays for efficiency only. It's not a difficult concept, to be honest. To which long jumping does correctly identify the nature of the post. And then a blue orb. I think a blue orb actually had 2 comments on this. So it's not even efficient when you have to scroll around to get to one of the places to dry the thing when you actually want to use them. It just wastes times that could have been saved by 5 minutes of organizing. To which, or you could, just stick all the books that you've read in the reading room and move on. It's not that hard. People want things to look neat and tidy. Who are you to tell them what to do? If you don't like them doing that, then you just don't have to watch them do it and play the game how you like to play. So one of the reasons why I said, I've been watching the YouTube people who probably didn't even pay for the game. There was a Steam... There's a Steam... sorry, it was a Steam comment about somebody saying, like, streamers shouldn't get an early copy of this. They're not paying for the game and they shouldn't be able to spoil it for other people. So this definitely was me sort of riffing off of that. Boss Q, I refuse to believe that people read the third point and keep believing this is a serious post. I can definitely tell you that this is half of the people prior to the fan work definitely thought this was serious. This is probably comedy, but I actually find it enjoyable to organize things. Jacobin93 also liked as well. Gets mad, looks at the username. I still downvoted. I know people who would actually play this way. But yeah, there was actually one, there's one that I felt rather bad about. So somebody was talking about accessibility. So this was the one time that I dropped character on this. I said, normally I just let silly posts stand on their own demerits, but you mentioned accessibility here, and I never want people to wind up in a worse spot for my silliness. This wasn't intended as a serious post. A few hints here, but the big one is that I don't believe books get soaked even if you leave them in the rain. If it inspires something helpful, then that's great to hear, but I would not want you to enjoy the game less for an optimal strategy that was only ever intended to be a silly post on Reddit. So, yeah, I will definitely drop character in some of these cases if it feels like somebody's going to enjoy the game less because of this. But it was really funny. Like, even in terms of the comments, you do get to see that 50-50 split. So, anyways, I'm sorry to, obviously I'm basically laughing at my own joke here, but to your note on the big pile of books, there is some precedent for not real, like I feel like for the most part I am reasonably well behaved, but definitely inside some chats I will be I would like to say pro-social troll. I don't mind. So there's a big thing that we talked about this with Jonathan Swift actually, because I think Verses on the Death of Dr. Swift has like a nice little set of rules for good trolling, which are both effective and I think keep you from becoming an unpleasant person. So I think there can definitely be some value in winding people up, particularly when it comes to gaming, because there's a certain subset of people who take gaming way too seriously, and being able to point out some ridiculous things will be fun. And like sometimes you can just like, break the ice or it's fun. So like a really common one that I've noticed is if you go in and say, oh, Elden Ring, this looks like a Dark Souls ripoff. From Software should sue these guys. Or, you say the same with Bloodborne or something. You have no idea how many people will, like, jump down your throat. Like, the people wanting to correct you on the internet, they will fall over themselves looking like a complete idiot if it means that they get to correct you. Like, they for whatever reason, just completely take leave of their senses. And as soon as somebody says something wrong, they never think it's intentional. They always think it's because, this is a moron who needs to be set straight. So, I don't have that much pride, so I'm willing to take the hit if it means a good laugh like that. But I think it's also really important. So number one, if there's hurt feelings, 100%, it's on the troller to own it and apologize. But like the thing that you want to be really careful about, because again, trolling is something of a lost art. It's never just being mean, right? So like one thing we talked about this, I can't remember if this was a private chat that I had with Oswin or we talked about this on stream, but like one thing I always feel very uncomfortable with, and this happens a lot in politics, I notice, but like you'll see people comment on people's physical appearance, right? So, they'll be overweight or like they'll have like a big nose or odd lips or something like that. Like, we've all seen these, right? And I've never ever felt like the politician that you're ridiculing, like they don't lose office because somebody made fun of their appearance. They don't behave differently. They learn absolutely nothing. They probably are unaware of the comment being made. But everybody with that trait, right? And like I like using, really common ones. So like, weight is a really common one because it's one that, probably a circle of friends will have a pretty wide variety of body shapes. The only person who feels bad is the observer who maybe feels a little insecure about that. And sees someone else, mocking this person they perceive as an enemy, for this trait, which is completely orthogonal to their moral character. And I've always felt very bad about that, right? And I mean, I'm no prize, right? If somebody's going to be making fun of somebody's looks, like, I'm probably on the receiving end of the mean side of that. It just happens to be one that I'm not. I mean, I guess beyond the fact that I don't stream with a camera, but there's other reasons for that too. Like there are insecurities that people can attack for sure, but appearance probably isn't one of them. But again, I can sort of see how people would wind up feeling very bad because somebody just decides to kind of go ad hom in a really unpleasant way. And again, this is in the Verses of Death of Dr. Swift. He hates that accursed tribe who call it, call it wit when they jibe, call it humor when they jibe. Like, just being snarky is a great way to very quickly become an unpleasant person. And, if you have an audience of people who agree with you, they'll clap, they'll laugh. But I don't really think that there's a lot of elegance or art behind it. Whereas if you can do something, right, if you can point to a certain ridiculousness or a certain tendency or like a bad habit, if it's something that people have a chance to change, and probably should change, then that's usually when you're on something better. So like the silliness in terms of the bridge, that was just kind of funny for its own sake, right? But obviously any subject of attack here is really the sort of person who wants to just kind of come in and tell everyone how they should be playing the game, particularly on something that they can control for themselves. So as Astini says, right, if you don't want spoilers, don't watch the streams. Yeah, that's exactly it. And of course, everybody in those comments are saying, well, why don't you just stop watching these streamers who do it? It's like, well, yeah, that's the point, right? But clearly there are people who don't do that. And so that's why, taking on that character, it gets a chance for me to sort of like wring out the mild frustration I had about that Steam post. While also just being kind of silly on the subreddit. And I was, for the most part, actually quite happy with how the reactions were there. But again, in that one case where the person talks about accessibility, that's the case. Like, usually what I'll do if somebody falls into the trap, so like, pointing out that, oh, it's a plot hole in Blade Runner that Edward James Olmos' character knew about Deckard's unicorn dream. There's absolutely no way that character could have known about that. You'll always have a bunch of people, well, actually, and, I won't go into the reasons why you may... I won't go into the actual, actually, but you probably, if you want to avoid spoilers for that movie, you probably should have seen it by now. But, and at that point you just say, you point out to the other ones where, plot hole, the Deckard's briefing says, Leon is 4 years old, yet he is clearly a middle-aged man, usually just doubling down is a wonderful way to, either hopefully bring people on the train. And if they still think you're a moron, then, at that point it becomes a sort of satire, which is the joke at the expense, a joke between the writer and the audience at the expense of the person who doesn't get it. But again, like, it's one of these things where it's, it's fun. It's nice to sometimes stir things up a little bit, but you never want it to be at a point where people are being attacked, again, except for behavior that, canon should be changed, if there's any attack at all. Observations on the Peacock Door. Nangala of Lagash discusses the Peacock Door, the highest door available to mortals in the Mansis, a rent, an imperfection, and abrasion. I appreciate you trolling responsibly. Well, it's a tough one. Like, it's something that I do run into. Like, there's I think the thing I've tended to find is that there's a type of humor that is completely indistinguishable from nitpicking. And it's just not fun. It's actually a really good way to, like, drag the mood down. And I especially notice, I think this is definitely a streaming thing where sometimes, like, a brutal sense of humor can sometimes be a shorthand for friendship, but I also think some people think that it is a shortcut to that kind of friendship. And what can happen is that it creates an environment in which somebody never actually hears a compliment. And again, you never want to be the sort of person who, like, only ever hears positive things and shuts out anything negative. You kind of want to make sure that you're somewhat balanced in what you hear. But on the other hand, right, like, if the whole point is humor and you're the only one laughing and it's at someone else's expense, that's where you've become a bully rather than, a wit. And so that's why I keep coming back to that Verses on the Death of Jonathan Swift, because honestly, he was the best at it. And I actually think that small passage is quite good at putting some useful guideposts. Notably, the book is written in Vac, which by some accounts is another aspect of the Peacock Door itself. Naingala addresses this by apologizing courteously to the door and the language at the end of every section. The Peacock Door did not exist, Naingala says, in the days when the gods from stone entered the Mansis. They used the fanged key to open the Savage Door, a door not usually available to mortals. Speech, as the initiates of Keon would have it, is a wound. I fear that through that wound, the blood of the Mansis flows even now, and that one day speech will be an end to dream. I fear that, but I fear the alternative far more. So, new contradiction, and sickle and eclipse. All right, looks like we have yet another... Yeah. I think there'll probably be a stream in the future where I just sort all the books, because I definitely need to reshelve some stuff. But it'll be easier when I clear out these. Okay, so I think that's all of the books I was working with. Excuse me. So the first thing I want to do here is try and get those last 2 levels of Wolf Stories, although I still have 25 seconds to go with the 25 seconds to go with the with opening the package. Mr. Kill, Ryan Spry doesn't mind stopping for a gossip. So do you have any sorting method currently? Generally, yes. So I will sort. The very first playthrough I did, I tried to sort the books by theme. So, I'd sort of have like the DeWolf section, and I'd have a Curia section, and so on and so forth. In general, because I haven't been consulting my spreadsheets as often, I'll usually just shelve based on the memory that they provide. The drawback is that because this has been sort of my to read section, I haven't. Oh, crumbs. This was a gossip. I got to remember which was the gossip shelf. I think this one. Yeah. Yeah, so I usually shelve these in accordance with the memory that they give me, but even that can be a bit of a challenge because you'll have these really long sections. So there's a lot of books that give confounding parables and foresight, for instance. And normally what I do is I'll try and move it to the next shelf down, but again, I've created a bit of a problem for myself by not clearing out this shelf yet. So yeah, well, it's mostly the first playthrough that I did, I had a spreadsheet for crafting for books, books/memories, and I think there was a third thing that I was keeping track of. And that was helpful. Like, it wasn't that hard to consult, but in this case, I found what I'd like to do where I can is spend less time consulting the different references that I have. I still keep a tablet beside me while I'm playing, but I do try to minimize the time that's spent looking stuff up, just because that dead air can sometimes be, it can be a drag for people who are watching, so I try and find a slightly better balance. Obviously, I'll still digress on a whole bunch of stuff. That's kind of the nature of the beast, unfortunately. But, or fortunately, I know some people like the rants, but I think the one thing that I can do is I can try and minimize the dead air by building up the house in such a way that I minimize that silent searching through a spreadsheet. But yeah, thematically, I've sometimes done it. Sorting by color would actually be kind of fun at one point. And then I can imagine trying to do one by time period, especially now that they do record what period they come from, might be sort of fun. But I always kind of feel like that's something... It's something that you... I think my shelving methods, as well as a couple, like how I set up the Tree of Wisdoms, those always are a bit of a reflection on the type of character I'm playing. So I'm not married to any one approach. Okay, let's get Wolf Stories leveled up. Okay, so I'm going to need 6 for the next one, so at last I am something of an authority in this. Improve the skill to level 6. So we'll get that taken care of right away. I'll do it the other direction this time. So Stolen Secrets is something that Mr. Kill might give me. Beguiling Melodies doesn't help. Bittersweet Certainties doesn't help because that's Lantern and Winter. Satisfaction doesn't, Revelations doesn't, Cheerful Ditties doesn't. I think this is Solace. Yeah, that doesn't help. Confounding Parables obviously does. So Locksmith's Dream Volume 2. Unhatched Hymns gives me the scale. Reading Room. I guess I can use the Faust here, but we are starting to run short on elements of the soul that I can use. Secret Thresholds will actually help, but in a different way. The Queen's turn. Salt gives me Moon. That might actually be it. Let me just double check here. So we've got Gossip. Oh, no, sorry, Contradiction. So... And then, yeah, Regret Sphere, Intuition, Storm, Pattern, Intuitions, Hindsight. It's not that these things don't help me, but they're things that I'm going to get through other interactions. We're also just halfway through the day, so there's plenty of opportunities to get the other ones. But yeah, we'll wait the minute. We'll probably wind up using the Earth Sign as well. But the hope here is that Mr. Kill will give me a couple of things that I can use for the level. Also, I can use the Old Wound if it comes down to it. Alright, an Impulse. It doesn't exactly make sense, but I understand it anyway. So, Dead Men Don't Tell No Bloody Tales. Well, who'd listen? I know the other thing that worries me too, the spreadsheet that I started working with was actually from the beta, not even the House of Light beta, but like the Book of Hours beta. So I definitely get the impression there were a couple of skills that changed. If nothing else, they changed their names, but I've never actually gone back to my spreadsheet and ever corrected any of that stuff. I've just kind of assumed that if I needed to make a correction, I would do it in the moment. But because I consult the spreadsheet a lot less, people don't ask me for it as often. I think that because there's a couple of community spreadsheets which have become a bit more authoritative anyway. But it was always a tough one just because I sort of knew what I was handing off to people. And, I just try to be as clear as I can. Hey, this is not like, don't rely too much on it. Like, I think it's good, but I don't think this is flawless. Okay, the Red Book of Brittany. A volume of ink lore gifted to St. Brendan's by Brian of Brittany, who was made Earl of Cornwall after the Norman conquest. The red flower lies heavy, but the roots of the Watchman's tree are constant. Red flour is described as the temptation of suffering, but its suffering can apparently be allayed when the copper fruit is enspelled with nectar aspect alongside herbs and infusion techniques. A variant of the same approach, with the inks of power techniques outlined here, can gentle Lethe into a great ink. It's quite a bit to take out of these. Yeah, well, that's just it. Like, again, contrary to my very bold statements about organizing the library, I think it's really important to play the game on your own terms, and like that. I like the process of building up my collection and my understanding. I think that's a really, as you say, that's a really big part of the game. And, it reinforces the ideas in it, right? You're a librarian, you're organizing knowledge, you're doing that yourself as the player. That's why, it's very fair to call this a role-playing game. It's not a role-playing game in the sense that you're rolling lots of dice and your stats are more these individual cards or levels of your skills rather than, an XP system. So for me, the process of acting like my character, being confused where my character may be confused, and taking that process of organizing things and figuring them out is one of the reasons why this has been such a rewarding game to play multiple times over. And I think my experience of the Cultist Simulator... So I did a tutorial video for Cultist Simulator. Haven't done one for Book of Hours yet. But one of the really rewarding parts of doing that video was that it seemed to have, I hate using terms like this just because it invokes a certain type of hyper or overread Silicon Valley blog reader, but the idea of product market fit, right? So this was a case where I said I had an intended audience for this, and the comments for that video really seemed to suggest that the audience that was intended for really got it. And what it was is just a recognition that Cultist Simulator didn't have a tutorial for a reason. It had sort of breadcrumbs to get you going, but it didn't have a formal tutorial. And that the game was better for it, but that there was going to be this middle ground of people who, by all accounts, would very likely enjoy the game, but needed a little bit more of onboarding to be able to realize the thing that they were playing, right? And I think it's easy to have sympathy for these people, right? If you enjoy conventional gaming, and I think most of us do, then the prospect of a game that does not give you a tutorial and will fail you, right, by starving you to death, it absolutely can come off as even incompetence in some cases, right? Because there's a wide variety of things on Steam, right? You when you play something unusual, you don't know if somebody's doing something really interesting and avant-garde or if they're just incompetent. Now, as with most forms of creative expression, you just kind of know, right? There is a reason why people do tend to gravitate around certain work. So, very common thing you'll hear about David Lynch is, it's just a bunch of random stuff together. I think even in some cases you can see maybe somewhere, there are definitely some shows where you can see when they have a clear idea, and other ones where they've really kind of gotten ahead of themselves, and it's really, there's no center to it. But yeah, I think it would be very hard to say that David Lynch stuff is just random. And it's probably not a coincidence that there is a large number of people who really enjoy his stuff, as opposed to the many student films, which are in fact just random stuff put together because they maybe don't quite appreciate that there is a specific craft behind what's being brought in. But in any case, right, so the whole purpose of that video was to say, you're never going to convince somebody who doesn't like or is just not the intended audience for Cultist Simulator. You're never going to convince them that the game is worth playing, nor should you, right? Those people are better served by moving, refunding if they paid for the game, and moving on to something that is more in line with their interests. Not every game has to be like universally loved. But there is a subset of people who might be wanting to return the game who actually could really enjoy it, just as long as they sort of understand that the reason the stuff isn't explained is that's part of the fun, right? It's the game that, you learn by playing, or the game that teaches you by playing. And so that tutorial was sort of built with that in mind, and actually encouraged people to stop watching once they had what they needed. So likewise, I played Cultist Simulator with a notebook. I've played actually I had probably 3 different notebooks for Book of Hours at some point. And to me, just it's nice to have that artifact of the playthrough. I think that's a big part of the enjoyment for me is to sort of have this document that represents my journey through Hush House. And the fact that they include a history screen with the tarot cards, I think, is actually a neat touch too. But yeah, it's why, I don't think it's bad that the wikis exist, and I don't think it's bad that the spreadsheets exist, but I think that there is a default setting that people have to just, if you run into something that you don't know in a game, you go and find an online resource to do it. And I think more people can actually really, I think being lost can be enjoyable once you just sort of learn that may be an intended effect, and that in some cases you can sometimes miss something, or you can maybe have a lesser experience at the risk of saying lesser is where people sort of maybe get a little defensive. But I really do feel that there are opportunities to really experience something special if you just allow yourself to be a little bit lost in a game, sort of knowing that on the other end you're going to be able to you're going to have it make more sense, and you'll be one of those people who completely is just raving like a lunatic about that game. Yeah, exactly. Like it's like, to me, it's why the game has the power that it does. Like in the case of Cultist Simulator, you are an individual who has been given a glimpse on sort of this special and secret world, but only a glimpse. The rest of the game is figuring out what that means and how you act in relation to that. And if you go out into the world, right, it's not like there is a deep dark mysteries beneath the skin of the world for dummies book. Usually how you gain that information is through piecing things together. I mean, I was just out of grad school when I first encountered Cultist Simulator. Actually, I think I was in grad school when I was encountering Cultist Simulator. So obviously I really relate to this idea of putting together a big pile of books and trying to like get those little fragments and turn them into bigger knowledge. And obviously there's different ways that people can relate to that. You don't just have to be, over... You don't need to try to sort of extend your adolescence by adding a few more years of schooling. But yeah, like it's... to me, like I could not imagine the game any other way. Now that might be a statement of my lack of imagination, but to me, like the default reaction of wanting to go and get a solution, an external resource to give you the solution. Again, it's a very natural response when you play games in 2024. Like it's sort of the way that if you I really like some of the old adventure games. So like what are some of the ones I've gotten on GOG? So it's like Gabriel Knight or the Space Quest games, or the LucasArts ones like Day of the Tentacle and Full Throttle. Like those, in those games they have like the advertisement for the tip line, and let's be honest, some of the puzzles in those are just mind-mangling. Yeah, like that would be a separate product that you would buy, or you'd call a 1-900 number to get the answer of what was going on. But yeah, it's just one of these things that once you have the internet, like I'm assuming probably the advent of the internet is what brought that big shift. But nowadays between YouTube, between most games, so I think most gaming sites, their high traffic segments are the how do you complete ... sections, right? So when a game comes out, they have basically a full guide ready to go in terms of how you get through certain things. There's no shortage of material on basically how to play the game. And, again, if that's what people want, who am I to tell them otherwise? But I, for my own part, I really couldn't imagine. I really don't like the idea of being a fleshy implementation of somebody else's algorithm. And I've tended to find that when I allow myself to make mistakes, it's also where I discover new things about games that I enjoy. And so it's why, even though it may be a very natural reaction today, it's one that I still don't, I recognize that as something that other people do than something that I seek out for myself. Although, just to be clear, like I'm not a maniac about it. Like if I'm having trouble with a game and I'm about to stop, I'm gonna go look it up. But generally, I prefer resources that are more references. So like if you're playing a big grand strategy game, getting something that'll tell you what the hit points and, the various stats are. It'd be nice if the game gave you that information on its own, but I appreciate that for some strategy games, like there is way too much information to comfortably display at any one time. And so, for those, I don't think I like it when people have just data that I can work with. And then, sometimes it'll usually be, oh, well, the best way that you can use the X, Y, or Z ship or unit or whatever. It's like, okay, I'm just going to skip over that. And again, it's not even that they're wrong. They're usually right. But all that does is that teaches you to play a very specific way. And it closes off the possibility of learning another way of playing. Or possibly just owning that understanding and why that's a good idea. I think what that does is just gives you a dependence on resources like that. The Locksmith's Dream, Portions and Proportions. The second volume of Teresa Galmier's examination of parallels in the mystic dreams of artisans. The frontispiece has been slashed with a razor. In this volume, Galmier records fewer dreams and explicates more on her own elaborate theories. We see this again and again. What is below can't escape what is above. The finest artisans all dream of the white door in the end. I'm no artisan, only a scholar. I think there is a secret that all these artisans know, but I think that secret is only half the story. Need to divide these a little bit better. Unhatched Hymns. Hymns attributed to St. Lucia the Eyeless, patron of glassworkers and name of the hour called Meniscate. The hymns venerate every sanctioned hour, celebrating them as the sun undivided, but also suggesting that each may become the next, madrigad to watchman, watchman to wolf, and so on. The Hymn of the Phases celebrates the Meniscate from whom we do not turn, for the truth which is beauty, the beauty which is truth, and the perfect balance between the two. The Hymn of the Reflections, more puzzlingly, celebrates the Meniscate as the sister of Janus, mother of Shadow, whose visage wondrous in emptiness can reveal all truths. For Cultist Simulator, you think I only look up things after getting all the endings, minus the Exile, because I still haven't figured that one out yet. Oh, there's so many endings to Exile, too, so that one... yeah, the other thing, too, like, in some cases, you'll look up a wiki just because the game doesn't merit a full, like, subsequent playthrough. I actually do sometimes wish that games were a little more confident in the endings and would just give you... Because, like, so many games I've played will give you, like, 2 different endings, and one of them is clearly more suitable to the story than the other. And I'm just like, just have the confidence in your storytelling and stick with the one. Like, the illusion of choice is, isn't that important to me. I actually like the fact that Exile fails you fast. I've had one case where I have like a deeper run on Exile where I've been beaten. But I actually really like that Exile just starts off super hard, and then you can kind of hit a certain sort of escape velocity, or it feels that way at least. But yeah, Exile is definitely a very different kind of experience. But there's some games where you're not taking. Yeah, like Minecraft or Terraria. Also, I think just because they are real time, like the idea of sort of pausing and thinking about that stuff can feel a bit unusual too. So. The Queen's Turn, a 16th century translation of the Barrowchild's account of Lagia's turn, when Lagia, the queen unsated, was offered the opportunity to enter the service of the Hours of the Triple Knot as long as she repudiated her brother-lover Antaios. Lagia accepts, setting aside the arts of the Low Red Sun associated with Antaios. She bargains, however, for freedom for her daughters. The Hours of the Triple Knot accept casually, knowing that Lagia has devoured her daughters, but wily Lagia has decided, in the secret hollow of her heart, that she will adopt any who ask if they can prove their fierceness. The traditions described here, the ones generally described as hill and hollow, are associated with Lagia before her turn, but now that she is a name of the Red Grail, they might also be safely used before an altar of the Triple Knot. De Bellis Murorum, an 18th century epic poem by the pseudonymous Solipstos. The poem elliptically describes a war between beasts, weather phenomena, and arcane concepts. It's quite specific about their tactics. The two one joined, and the horned distinguished, consequently blood. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I need 2 more, so I'm probably going to have to use the old... Oh, no, hang on. No, yes, I am going to need to change it up. The Temptations of Architecture. The antiquarian and nyctodromist Ambrose Westcott writes of the dangers of doors, with particular reference to a house in the Bounds named Treowin. No doubt they have come to regret their the ambitions of their winding stair. Even now in Treowin, a silvery sea is unwisely visible from a rash window. How you doing, Algrins? I always appreciate the lurk. The stats are stats, but it's always nice to be able to say hi to you as well. Westcott explains that the wheel locks, the charge holders of Treowin, have had recourse to dramatic measures to prevent Oniric encroachment, removing the entire top floor of the building. Nevertheless, he writes, the business of the Moon Hall has begun to touch the other business of the house. I might be running short on elements of the soul, but let's see what we can do. Okay, so first things first, I want to get that last level of wolf stories. So, intuition, confounding parable, savage hymn, salt, contradiction. Oh, cool. Earth sign it is then. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Improve the skill to level 7. So let me just double check what I want to make sure that I'm appropriately packing it in as far as the wolf stories go. So yeah, wolf stories needed to be 7. Path and Pilgrim needed to be 8, and we've already got Leaves and Thorns at the level that it needs to be. Okay, so if I want to level up Path and Pilgrim, I need 2 more Rose or Scale memories. Now, those are not that hard for me to get, because with Winter, I can... sorry, let me just double check Path and Pilgrim. Yeah, Rose and Scale. So, again, I want to assume that Mr. Kill can potentially give me some of these. I also need to restore my Earth sign. So the contradiction doesn't work anymore. I would need actually, yeah, come to think of it, the rose and scale stuff is hard to get a hold of if I want to restrict myself to things that Mr. Kill potentially won't step on. So I don't wind up okay, let me just double check this again. So this is to restore my earth sign. That's one. Oh, I didn't do Singlefoot songs. Okay, so that should get me another point in Path and Pilgrim. So I need to set aside the FET for that. The question is, does it make sense for me to try and use the remaining 2 elements of the soul? Honestly, it really doesn't. So what I will do instead, we will take another trip to the moor, clamber up the long reaches of the moors behind the village, lean into the wind's fluttering fist. If I know what to look for, I might find something among the rocks. And then I think the metal I'll maybe just use to make some money at the Sweet Bones. It sounds kind of lame, but I just don't see how it helps me to... Oh, actually, I could talk with the Stimpfling and get the Horizon Sight again. And then we can feed it. And then I will get another sack of vegetables just because those are always nice to have. Carrots, tomatoes, marrows, and blessed onions, all the unsung heroes of the stew pot. Yeah, I think so. Where it originally comes from is once I kind of felt comfortable with the beta, and I was noticing that there's different text depending on which branch of the Tree of Wisdoms you put your memories in. I really sort of felt a certain responsibility to, I'll say, like, regret minimize. I wanted to try and make sure that I think I can afford another chat with Mr. Kill. I wanted to try and make it so that I had as many options as possible when committing skills to the Tree of Wisdoms. And so what this would mean, like, there was actually, when I think it was this was transitioning from the beta to like my first main run, but I did it so that I didn't commit anything to the Tree of Wisdoms other than the original journal. I think I put like 1 skill in to try and just indicate to people that I knew how the Tree of Wisdoms worked and that it was a choice. And inevitably people still told me, you can open the Tree of Wisdoms to get more elements of the soul. It's like, yeah, but I'm trying something here. So I was able to unlock the entire house before committing anything meaningful to the Tree of Wisdoms, which is a fun challenge. But obviously, if you don't commit skills, you are really limited in what you can do during the day. And so I've just sort of trained myself to wring out every last bit. Now, the thing that's funny too, my boss will probably tell you, my boss is really, really wonderful. Like my direct supervisor. Yeah, exactly. I put it in the first slots. I usually leave crack track for level 2, and then I have to decide between preservation and excuse me, between preservation and illumination. My boss is really nice in the sense that she is quite conscious of my tendency to work and overwork, and has always been extremely clear, if you need more time, deadlines can be pushed. You are not expected to put in any more than your 7.5 hours. If you need more time for something urgent, you can put in for overtime. Just let me know ahead of time that it's there. Now, the drawback is that I really like the work that I do.
I'm coming from a place where I felt that I was underutilized to a place where I really feel like I'm putting everything into the work that I do, and I like being in that mode. Um, and this does actually sometimes make me a bit of a pain in the neck to work with, because I'm also quite meticulous on some of the stuff that I do. So like if I'm looking at something and it seems like there may be a mistake, I will probably find it, and that will usually cause me to like not in the presence of the other person, but I will go and I will double check all the stuff in the background, because one mistake usually implies that there are other ones. Um, and again, it's not, I don't write in all capital letters email or anything like that, but it's just one of these things where I have that somewhat meticulous nature for this particular type of work. And this will mean that, I am kind of in my element when I'm doing that, but it's easy to have the hours sort of go away. So I would also say, while it is kind of me training myself to work with the constraints, I actually do also tend to find that this is a bit of a reflection of a bit of who I am as a person, right? And I'm not even necessarily going to say that that's a good trait, right? Like I realize, again, I'm going to use the Silicon Valley jargon. I know founder mode is a thing that everybody's talking about nowadays. And like, who was it? Yeah, I got a really nice email from someone, and they had said something along the lines of, that wasn't work ethic, but it was like it's something about like being hardworking is sort of like a neutral or like it's a neutral characteristic, right? Like bravery is a neutral characteristic. You can be very brave when performing a horrible act, and you can be brave when you're performing a good act. And likewise, being a hard worker can be something that's very desirable in certain circumstances. And there are other ones where they can be bad for yourself. And they can also be like, you can just be a hard worker towards something monstrous, right? And that was actually, again, that was a very memorable email, clearly because I can't remember the exact phrasing. That was something that, just words that came at the right time and wound up having some resonance a little bit later that I didn't appreciate at the time. But yeah, like I would be lying if I didn't say that there is a bit of a reflection of myself in the way that I tend to wring out all of the elements of the soul, and it always feels a little bit weird if I'm not sort of just cramming in the last thing of the day. And there is a cost to it. Like there is a very, very strong danger that I burn out when I get in that mode. And it's one of the reasons why I take Canadian holidays off now. Because it is, I always find that when I start to burn out, it always comes too late. Like I just find that I am more on edge, or that I'm not thinking straight, that it sort of feels like kind of there's, it's like it's the most horrible feeling in the world. Like it's you know that you're smarter than that, but the ideas are not coherently lining together. But because you are in the state of burnout, you don't have that moment of realization to say, I've been burning the candle at both ends. There is nothing left. Like this thing is sputtering for a reason, and you just need to rest. So it's one of the things that, again, I really appreciate about the workplace I'm in, because, there are workplaces that will not take care of you that way. And it's something that I realize is actually very good for me because of that tendency that I have. But again, just to be clear, like I'd feel better if I feel like I have put all of myself into the day, right? And putting all of myself in the day, that can also mean that, I went for a 3-hour walk. And I would never want to. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Andrew Rodell. Like me to remember. You need all your ducks in a row, but your ducks are cats and water spray. That's a wonderful way of putting it, actually. But yeah, just yeah, like I definitely 3-hour walk. Maybe you're going with a book, or spending a day in a gallery, right? those are not the things that you would put on a performance. Okay, so don't do that during work hours, right? But, you wouldn't put that on a performance review. Or if you were sitting down saying that, these are the traditionally productive things, it's not like I wrote, this many functions for a program, or I, did this many commits. But, these are things that are still worth doing. They sort of refill the well. And it's different from just sort of, I've definitely had days where like I wake up really, really late, which is again, not bad on its own. But I also find it very hard. Like it'll be 6 o'clock in the evening and I like have no idea, what I've done with the day. And it's just sort of like, I'm never getting this day back. Why didn't I do something for myself? Even just watch a TV show that I wanted to see. Sometimes I find like I'll watch something that I've seen before. So I've seen all of Breaking Bad. And if I watch another episode of Breaking Bad again, it's not a bad way of doing it, right? It's if you enjoyed something in the past, you can get something out of watching something again. But, if you start binging something that you've watched before, and you're really just sort of passing the hours kind of staring slack-jawed at a screen, sometimes, I don't know, I don't always feel good after that. So that's how I'm wired. Maybe I'll learn to relax in retirement or something. Or they'll just find me slumped over my keyboard at work and I can horrify somebody as my last act. Wolf stories. Sometimes we eat the wolf, and sometimes the wolf eats us. So level 7, that's where I wanted to have it. 8 moon, 7 scale, birdsong, or skolakosophy. We will be ready to commit that to the Tree of Wisdoms when the time comes. Mr. Kill, Ryan Spry, doesn't mind stopping for a gossip. And he gave me foresight. Dead men don't tell no bloody tales. Well, who'd listen? Right, I was going to talk with the Stimfling. Ava DeWolf taught her father Valentine how to hatch these silvery little villains, but he never learned to like them. Time with the beastie offered this beast my company. Who knows? Perhaps it will offer something in return. And I think I'll just make the money back in this case. So help with letters. I could offer help with correspondence and arithmetic. There's no school in Brandkrug, and not everyone here knows their letters. I actually delayed on, I'm not going to sell out everything at once. I just kind of delayed on putting the skills that I already had in because I wanted, I kind of wanted to give people a chance to come into the stream, and then I just wound up having, for me at least, an enjoyable chat with all of you. So I just didn't get around to committing it, but we'll actually commit a few of these in just a moment. But yeah, I used to read both branches. In this case, I have a pretty clear idea of where I'm putting them. But right now, I just had a couple that I was waiting on letting people letting people get into the stream. But obviously, it's been about 2 hours. I figure anybody who's gonna want to watch the stream has already arrived. And Wanderer Down says, you're running the artist in your game and planning on doing all of the story skills in Birdsong. Yeah, I've wanted to do that before. There's a couple of other plans that I had for playthroughs that stopped me from doing that. But I think what you're talking about here, right, is like snow stories, stone stories. Would you count, I guess strings and songs would... Well, first of all, that doesn't go into Birdsong. Or does that? Hang on. There's a third story. Sea Stories was the one I was thinking of. I've always wanted to do that, but I've never actually... And Sky Stories, sorry, I don't think I mentioned that one. But I've always had something to get in the way of... I've always had something to get in the way of me doing that run. There's 6 of them, right? Sea, Sky... Oh, yeah, sorry, you're all saying. So Sea, Sky, Snow, Sand... Oh, you said snow twice. Hang on. Stone. Okay. Oh, so is it 5? Snow, sea, snow, song, sea, sky. Or is it song? But yeah, strings and songs, I guess, isn't a story, though. So 5. Wolf! Of course. The one that I just did. Anyway, as you can see, not one that I've not one that I've actually pulled off myself, if nothing else, because I keep I keep stumbling over my idiocy. Yeah, what I'll do here, I'll finish off the day, and then at the end, I'll well, so I'm actually really bad for this. One of my better econ profs. So there's some good educational research on this. So at the school I went to was UBC, and they as a broader, I don't think it's mandatory, but they do encourage the instructors to use what are known as the clickers. So what will happen, the way the prof did this really well, which is that one of the ways that there was sort of a de facto attendance was that participation on clicker questions would be part of a grade. And it's only going to like account for something like 10 or 15% or something like that. But like, you know, it's something where if you, like that's an easy baseline to run with. I'm assuming probably the higher level the course goes, the smaller the participation marks become. Because like at that point, you're sort of expected to actually be doing some kind of even minor scholarship if you're at a 304 level course. But the idea here is that it's a way of like, it's interactive, right? You're not just passively absorbing a lecture, you are participating in it. And these clickers, I'm actually, if I recall correctly, there's a decent book on learning called Make It Stick. And unfortunately, there's a couple of other books called Make It Stick. I don't recall the authors offhand. I found it through a book that was recommended to me called Range by David Epstein. So actually, you know what? If I look at the bibliography, I can probably find it. Just one second here. Oh dear. I don't think they do a standard bibliography. I think they leave them all to the notes. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to see. I know it was sort of near the start. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to find this on time, but anyway, Make It Stick. I do recommend it if you can find it, and it talked a little bit about the research behind it. But essentially, they just tended to find that learning outcomes were better when you had that interactive component. But there was actually another level that the prof did, where there'd be a clicker question, and if a certain percentage of the class did not get the correct answer, he would re-ask the question, but re-ask the question in groups, so that essentially the correct answer would sort of be diffused among the participants. And very often you would see, like, you could actually see the record of how people answered before and then after, and the conversation would be what would drive it. But I learned an absolutely horrifying feature of myself, which is there would be times where I would be incorrect, but very certain, and in fact so certain and apparently persuasive that I would take people from the correct answer to the incorrect answer. And this would happen on a somewhat regular basis, even with the knowledge of this trait. So to a certain extent, you know, very nice to know that I possess that rhetorical ability, I suppose. but very concerning in terms of my own biases and my I don't want to say stubbornness. Like it's not like I was very open to being convinced otherwise, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're all watching the stream. I leave it to the audience to decide whatever charisma I possess, but at least in person in a learning context, I have that baseline of charisma to bring people over to the wrong side. Yeah, I'm hoping, of course, obviously I hope in a real job where there are actually actual consequences for some of the things that I do, that I have learned a little bit more discernment with the information that I have, or at the very least a bit more openness to the possibility of being wrong. But I always tend to find, like, one of the big challenges that I run into is that I do want to be challenged on some of this stuff, right? Is that if people, I think you can get to interesting places if you make a clear claim. And in fact, sometimes even in terms of writing, making a claim that's maybe a little bit stronger than what you normally would in conversation can lead to some interesting writing and some interesting ideas. And the hope is that you get a bit of pushback so that you can kind of reach to the truth. But the drawback is that people are conflict averse. So if you, like, the thing I hope for myself is not that I seem like the sort of person who's going to have a tantrum if my conclusion isn't taken, because, in this case, and I feel pretty secure on this because I've co-written a couple of things recently where, someone says you can't put that in writing. Like, there's no way. I was like, no, I'm just free associating here, right? This is the idea generation phase. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's an interesting hypothesis. If you can find something for it, then bring it up. But like, yeah, you want to be careful that people, like, because the thing is like, if you just want to clock in 9 to 5, you're going to take the path of least resistance. So if the person seems really convinced of what they're saying, and saying yes means you can get to lunch earlier, and then that just means that bad ideas wind up in final products. But yeah, I mean, again, this is why peer review and stuff like that works. Obviously, that reflects back. None of my coworkers are looking to do lunch early. I'm actually blessed by having some very smart, definitely smarter than me coworkers who are willing to make their. I mean, there's specializations that I have, but yeah, like in terms of like knowledge and experience, I'm the learner on this one. So I do still sometimes feel that there's a useful role that I play by asking or saying preposterous things so that they can learn. Like in D&D, sometimes you need to ask leading questions if you want to. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I wish I played more D&D than I actually do. I feel that tabletop role-playing is discrimination against the lonely. Wrapped in the King, detailed accounts of secret bacchanals and ecstatic dances observed in necropolises and graveyards in southern Europe, in Egypt, and in Anatolia. The author is a self-confessed ghoul and eater of buried flesh. He claims to have witnessed the dances while at his feasting. The dances draw from the traditions of the mysteries of the cults of both Isis and of Sybil, and include both symbolic and literal flayings, and the human heart is always central in the rites. The author punctuates his accounts with queasily sensuous descriptions of his own interrupted feasts. At these greater feasts, a black pig is always crowned as king before its slaying. On this occasion, its heart was weighed in the balance against a knot of feathers, and the skin became a cape for the officiant. Its flesh was left for the crows, but I must confess my interest was not in its carcass, but in the perfumed flesh of the milliner laid fresh in the earth. Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, no, it's a good gaming group is surprisingly difficult to find. And it's almost like making friends. So I do still, I do occasionally check in on my university subreddit. And I definitely see a lot of like, how do I make friends Reddit posts. And it's such a hard one to answer, right? Like, because to a certain extent, like, making friends is just something that comes very natural. In fact, so natural that it's hard to actually articulate how it happens. And yet there's a very clear set of steps that some people are better at than others in terms of going from strangers to people that, you have some common interest with. And some of it is like having interests. If you have lots of different interests, chances are you're going to find it easier to find friends because you have more points of common interest. Going out and doing things is a good way. So, if when I like gaming, I think it's an interesting hobby, and I think it's an area in which there are lots of interesting things happening. There's a lot of potential inside of gaming. But one drawback as a gamer is that it can actually be quite an isolated experience. And, it is also unfortunate that a lot of the gaming hobby does seem to be hating on the gaming hobby, right? So many communities are built around talking about how this type of game is bad. If you really like indies, then you look down on the Fortnite people, and that's not real gaming. Or if you're, a quote unquote core gamer, mobile is the thing that you hate. And obviously you don't want to do that. There's room for all of this. But the fact of the matter is that online communities are not necessarily the same as actually going out and meeting someone and building a friendship that way. So yeah, but the other thing about gaming, tabletop gaming groups is that, there is that physical proximity that you need. And especially if you live in smaller cities, smaller regions, or ones that have a bit of a thinner gaming crowd, it can be hard to find that good group. And then again, if you do kind of get hooked into the local scene, and then you find sort of new people, oh, hey, no, I know somebody from this other tabletop session, and there's sort of the cross-pollination and such. But yeah, online is such a huge benefit for groups. Although even then, I imagine it's hard to find sort of like-minded people. And also, I'm assuming the time commitment that everybody has to be willing to, arrive at the same time and be committed to showing up and doing the work every week. Like if you have a DM that's phoning it in every week, that group's not going to last very long. But yeah, I'd like to. I wish I did more tabletop gaming than I actually do. Although I have found one thing that's been really rewarding for me. I did this in Vancouver before I left, and then I sought out a local group. Getting involved in the local game dev community. So even though I'm not really a developer by the standards that most people would say, I do have a couple of credits on things, and I have done a specific design role on a game, balancing out some elements and such. So it's not to say that I'm completely unfamiliar with it. But what I have really enjoyed is getting involved with the local game dev scene, not necessarily because I like all the games, although they are actually a lot of them very good ones, but it's just a chance where being able to talk with creative people about what they are working on and see them present what they're working on is another one of those examples of building community. And there was actually I don't want to give away too much, but I'm going to assume most people here haven't experienced this, but there was actually a guy. It's one of the reasons why I'm always try to make sure in that group, because I'm sure you've all figured out talking is not a difficulty for me. But I remember there was somebody who, I'd seen them before, but I don't think I'd seen them interact with an entire person up to that point of the presentations. And so I made sure, during one of the breaks, I just sort of, introduced myself. I was like, hey, you've been here before, right? It's like, yeah. And then I don't even remember the next thing that we talked about. But it was really clear after a little while that he was supposed to meet a friend, and his friend was usually the one who'd sort of be the talker. And so he just felt completely isolated because he was very, very shy. And as it turned out, there was somebody who had worked for Activision and had worked for Ubisoft, and he was in a game development program, and he was specifically interested in designing engines. there was a textbook that both this guy and I had read. And so this guy just given a presentation, and, he said is like, yeah, that was such an interesting presentation. I said is like, well, do you want to talk to him? I'm sure he'd love to give you some recommendations. I mean, he has probably done the job that you want when you graduate. And then he's like, oh, like, could you, like, I don't want to make people do it, but like, I'd love to. So I said to him, like, so first of all, when this guy, it's been a couple months since I've seen him, but I wanted I want to follow up with him and see what he's up to. But I says, like, when he doesn't bite your head off, like, I'm hoping that you're going to take that as an indicator that you'll put yourself out there next time. But number two, yes, like, in terms of your career, your ability to talk to people and form that connection and, potentially get a mentor, potentially become a mentor to other people will be something that really, really helps you. So yes, I absolutely want to help you out with this. So I went over and, the guy was talking with somebody else, but I go over and like the thing that was for me was I'd already talked to the Ubisoft / Activision Blizzard guy, right? So to me, it's just saying hi to this guy that I already know. And as I happen to know, he likes some of my writing. So that was an even easier but of course he found out about my writing because I talked to him first. And, shouted it, and sure enough, the guy, just the nicest guy possible, he's like, oh, you want to make game engines? Sure. It's like, have you read this textbook? And there's like a textbook, I think it's called Game Engine Architecture. It's by a guy who works at Naughty Dog on their tooling and infrastructure. And, he had that recommendation. He said, and he actually, it turns out he went to the exact same program that this student had been in. And so they were able to kind of bond about teachers, like the most natural conversation possible. Guy was really grateful for it. And I actually wound up seeing him on transit a little while afterwards. And, I was originally going somewhere else, but figured I'd stay for the chat, sort of see how things went afterwards. But, that's a perfect example on both sides of how friendships get made, right? So in one case, if you're the more gregarious individual, being able to talk to people, make them feel welcome. You never know what that person's going to be. And in this particular case, it was actually somebody who the presenter I happen to know felt really good that someone was so interested in what they were talking about. The person who wanted to know more benefited from that because they were able to make a contact that they haven't had before. And it was just a nice little, teachable moment in terms of saying, like, imagine what would have happened if you'd never talked to this guy, right? You would have missed out on this really fun evening that you had. But it's a tough one too, right? Because I've been shy before. So I know it's something that you kind of need to grow out of. But this is one of the things that, to me at least, in terms of gaming, like specifically digital gaming, I found was a good way to sort of break out of that isolation that can sometimes come in, which is making games is not the same as playing games, but if you can get involved in the local game dev scene, and if there isn't one, to potentially found one, right? Those can often be really good ways to sort of build up community and do a little bit more than just sort of sit in isolation. I'm also kind of lucky too, because the local community, like I have some weird ideas, and I've definitely run into some fairly. I very often hear well, you're not a game designer, so it's usually if I have a controversial opinion on something, I'll usually hear well, you're not a game designer, so you can't have an opinion. I'm like, well, of course I can have an opinion. Like no other discipline in the world ever accepts this as a reasonable argument. I've never heard that from the local community. And I know I've presented on stuff which is like the opposite of what everybody in the room believes. So that's another thing that's really cool about where I'm at. And again, none of that stuff happens by accident. That's definitely a product of the organizers making it that way. 108. Ava DeWolf discourses on the fifth history, and particularly on those who are said to have passed over from it, the great hooded princes, the Knocklong who ascended under the mother of ants, but now, so Ava claims, honor the horned axe. The great hooded princes call their library the Tomb of Lies, and this has given rise to a foolish tradition that the princes are habitual liars. Of course, in fact, truth flourishes when lies are slain. On the other hand, the princes do not say knowledge is power, but rather power is knowledge. Ava has, to her regret, never visited the library. She notes that it is said to be west of the Lion and north of Victory, and suggests that although the princes are generally associated with India, their library might be further east. And Singlefoot songs, Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Hwashan near the Grove of Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the Grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which he suggests causes harm only when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices, powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoots sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. Alright, so I think we have time for at least one more in terms of today's tasks for Path and Pilgrims, so we'll get that cleared out. So satisfying to have come so far. So obviously we'll need 2 more rounds of that, but we can get started on that on the next day. And then we kind of rinse and repeat. Oh yeah, sorry, I said at the end of the day I was going to commit the skill. We'll do it in the morning, how about? I think originally I was going to try and do it with the Salons if I needed sort of a last-minute element of the soul, but I haven't needed to do that recently. Now that night has fallen, I can rest and perhaps dream on the day's doings. And now it suggests a meal would be welcome. So we'll feed that first thing tomorrow. Bonkles, how you doing tonight? At some point I'm going to need to unpack all these sacks of vegetables, but I also need to open up the containers as well. Sorry, the one in Red William, or sorry, the Smuggler's Den. Crate of supplies and forsaken packages. Yeah, I wasn't feeling great this morning, but I rested up and I kind of got through the end of the day, and it did allow me to start a little bit closer to on time. I should technically be ending around this point, but I still want to make sure I do the full 3 hours. But still being able to start within that 1 hour window is a nice change, because I know I've been shirking. Okay, so I think it was Nyctodromi that we were going to fill out first. So for Nyctodromi, we had Edicts Liminal that we were going to commit. Edicts Liminal, the precepts of limitation and division established by the enigmatic conclave of hours, sometimes called the Chancel. Sapphire, there's a prophecy of a glorious city that mortals could raise, but the hours of the Chancel have decreed that it will not exist. The decrees of the Chancel are not defied, but now and then they have been circumvented, and we might conceive that a city with walls of shining flint could be raised in dreams, in the Mansus. This would be Nyctodromi. And then finally we have Coil and Chasm, Worms, 7 Coils, Dangerous Places, How Earthquakes Are Bound and Why They Are Released. Peacock. The night arts teach that the Peacock Gate is the highest door in dreams to which mortals may aspire, but that before she rose to this estate, the gate was a name of the horned axe. All Nyctodromists seek to understand what this might mean. So we've now completed the Nyctodromi branch. So if I want, I do actually have something I can start Skolakosophy with, but I might hold off. I'm actually noticing... I'm noticing a small flaw in this plan here, because there's something that's doubled up for position 7 in Ithistry. Okay, I don't really want to spend the rest of the stream working this out. I might have to do that on my own time. But what I think I'm going to do here, we are one component away from being able to max out Birdsong. So I think what I'll do here is I'll wait till we get Path and Pilgrim up to level 8 before I commit the remainder of those. Where did I put? Okay, Path and Pilgrim's currently at 5. So you've got 2 of the required lessons, but I still need 1 more. There's a few of you with some good animated emotes. I know Zerugdri usually comes in pretty strong with some animated ones. At some point, I do need to get animated emotes. They feel like they'd really liven up the place, but I'm too lazy. All right. So let's bring in Mr. Kill. I think getting another source of memories would be a good start. We've also probably got enough to be able to go to the moor and Crowcross Sands pretty regularly, so we'll keep on that. And then the obvious next step is anything that is scale and rose that I think I can use for Path and Pilgrim. Let's get that queued up. Animated element of the soul cards. How would they be animated? Just spinning whist? Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot of artistic skill on my own anyway, but I definitely find most of the ideas that I have tend to be ones that, like, they're difficult to execute. They're ones that would be, like, it's all well and good to have the idea, but it actually needs to be something that can be realized within the confines of a Twitch chat. And so that usually means a very specific, like, I don't know, the concept of hunger would be, a difficult emote to create. Not an impossible one, but, like, obviously that's a very abstract idea, whereas somebody waving, a cute figure waving is something that everybody can understand. So I could start with 3, I think. Honestly, if I just need 2 more, it feels like a bit of a waste not to go all the way. So let's maybe grab a fear and a stolen secret. I can never remember where I put my fears, though. It's not this one, is it? Yeah, those are intuitions. Oh, it's probably this. Nope, that's hindsight. I mean, I can go for hindsight if I have to, but now I'm actually slightly irked. Oh, okay. We've read Viennese Conundra before. Medusa's Lament. Actually, I think we've also read Medusa's Lamp. Well, we'll read it anyway. Okay, sorry, I got sidetracked. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and one more. Right, it was Stolen Secrets that I was going to go for. Foss and Shaft, his face emotes would be pretty funny. That is, actually, I wasn't even thinking of that, but... Also, hello, G Jealousy. I don't think I said hello to you yet. All right, the account of Kanishk at the Spider's Door. Actually, sorry, we read this one recently on Matthias and the Amethyst Imago is the one we haven't read yet. So for this one, actually, what I can do too, I can save myself a little bit of trouble. We'll feed the Stimfling for the start, and then we'll decide whether or not we want to keep going with Mr. Kill. So you should have another egg kicking around. We can't cook with these ones, so I prefer to use the Viper eggs to feed the carnivores. And I want to open a package. Forsaken packages, they plead mutely to be opened. No one else ever cared to. Crack open the container, delight in your discovery. I've carried a memory like a flambeau safe through the mazes of night. And another sunny day, so if I was trying to level up glass blowing and vessel crafting, this would have been a good chance for it, but I'm focused on a particular set of skills right now. The Road to Janus, or possibly Janus, depending on your pronunciation. The Limian Burzgash makes a series of prophecies regarding the initiates of the House of Silence, with intricate, if unhelpful, predictions on their passage through the house. Oriflamme's established 1776, Scent Sign Sciences. Dear librarian, we would like to offer you this opportunity to purchase. It's not a cheap book, but Oriflamme's thanks you for your custom. Mr. Kill can always spare a few hours for a friend. So we're kind of keeping him around sort of in reserve. But I'm definitely not opposed to having the option. It is summer. I am sitting on the bench outside the Sweet Bones, eating crumbly cheese and nettle wrappings with good black rye bread, soaking up the sun. Since I'm a fellow Cultist nerd, you wanted to ask, what's your favorite lore type? Has it changed with the additions from the Book of Hours? So I'll take that as what's my favorite aspect. So it has always been Lantern. I don't know if you've seen the networks of cultists. I keep referring to this on all the different streams, so I don't want to be too tedious about it, but I did a big network graph of all of the cards in Cultist Simulator. And obviously I was completely biased towards making sure that it concluded that Lantern was the best aspect. But I'm definitely like big on the Watchmen, big on Lantern. I've always liked Lantern. It's completely consistent with the things that I personally find interesting. I'm just going to be Lantern for life. If I had to give sort of honorable mentions, I would probably say Nock and Edge. And I've actually definitely grown to appreciate Edge over time. I think I've always liked Lantern and Nock the most, but it would definitely be Nock in position 2, and now it's sort of, Nock and Edge sort of fight for second place depending on my mood. Which also feels very appropriate, not just because of the fight, but also because, of course, the Mother of Ants and the Colonel. But in terms of... Bonkles likes heart. Interesting. I have definitely been charmed by the presence of sky. Wind, storm, echo, song, the intricacies of mathematics and the principles of flight. Law's touch is lighter than we sometimes think. Matters of balance, harmony, and necessity. So I think in terms of the new aspects that have been introduced into the game, probably I'm most interested in Sky. It seems, again, most aligned with the things that I'm interested in. And I particularly like how the introduction of Sky has introduced music into the setting, which wasn't necessarily there. In fact, one thing I actually really enjoy about Book of Hours is how it really engages all of the senses. And that's even prior to House of Light, right? There's references to sounds, there's references to tastes, to touches, very consistent with the idea of sort of exploring this house and all of the things that you sort of hear and experience inside of it. But clearly that's taken to a whole other level with the introduction of the salons, right? So you have that whole process of sort of preparing the salon and all the descriptions of the foods and the process of, you know, who do I invite, what do I serve them, what goes best with all these different things. So there's a few different reasons for it. I like the presence of Sky because of how it sort of opened up the experience of the secret histories. It sounds weird, right? But even though these are games primarily driven by text, the fact that all of the senses are engaged in a way that I don't want to say was lacking in Cultist Simulator, but definitely in a much greater way than was the case with Cultist Simulator, I think is a really special thing that was added, and I think it actually enhanced my enjoyment above and beyond just the introduction of another power. But I will say that it's equally interesting to see what... so usually people will have at least one of the new ones that they're into, and it actually reveals quite a bit. So Oswin Meow, who occasionally stops by, also streams this game. It was absolutely not a surprise to find out that she really likes Grail and Moon. Like, the game is wonderful in the sense that it starts you off with a personality test. So it's probably not surprising that I went for Faust and Shaft at the start. Full Belly makes a helpful friend. This beastie is now inclined to cooperate. All right. We've read this recently, but I might as well go through these. Yeah. It's why I wanted to hesitate to say was lacking from Cultist Simulator. They're very, like, they're different games, and they, like, part of the reason why Book of Hours can do this is because it doesn't kill you, right? There's a certain, you have to limit the amount that you throw at the player when you introduce the permadeath that's in Cultist Simulator, because you don't want, like, the game does a really good job of giving you enough distractions that you can miss stuff, and you can potentially forget to do something important, and that will cause sort of some cascading failures that will potentially end your run, and I think that's fair game. Like, even the idea of pausing, right? People don't necessarily realize at the start that they can pause. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Wanderer Down, that this game definitely is... It has an advantage in terms of being able to explore that. And I'm glad that they took it. The Temptations of Architecture. The antiquarian and nyctodromist Ambrose Westcott writes of the dangers of doors, with particular reference to a house in the bounds named Treowin. No doubt they've come to regret their ambitions of their winding stair, even now in Treowin. A silvery sea is unwisely visible from a rash window. Westcott explains that the wheel locks, the charge holders of Treowin, have had recourse to dramatic measures to prevent oniric encroachment, removing the entire top floor of the building. Nevertheless, he writes, the business of the Moon Hall has begun to touch the other business of the house. The Moon's Egg, the third and last volume of the Meditations of Abbot Thomas of the Abbey of the Black Dove. Abbot Thomas speaks of the coming death he hears in the sound of the waves, but rejoices that his blood will water the egg of the moon, by which he seems to mean the future. The last chapter was dictated, not written, by Abbot Thomas. When Thomas's old sword brother Trygeave returned to raid the abbey, Thomas had broken his monastic oaths and taken up arms to defend the abbey. The two had both been mortally wounded. Thomas's last words are, "The wheel turns, the moon sleeps." Medusa's lament on the death of the hour called Seven Coils, the father of the mother. The first part of the poem describes the ambush of the Seven Coils by a warrior scarred all over by the traitor gods, scarred even unto his eyes, so that the sight of the great coils would not destroy him. The battle rages on until the Seven Coils drowns in its own blood, at which point the narrative turns mystical and elusive. A seven-titled goddess arises from the foam of its blood. She is an armored queen, a serpent daughter, a key, a healer, a murderess, an oracle, but her seventh title is not to be revealed. On Matthias and the Amethyst Imago, Loss, an account of an occult romance. A certain Para, son of Aaron, claims to have written this in a single night as part of his initiation into the Damascene branch of the House of Leith, that order of immortals who rejected their past and future. The laws of the house forbade Matthias to love. The customs of the wood forbade the Imago to remain. So he conjured her a final time, when she had uncovered the shears of Alcapura, and she suffered him to cut the wings from her back so that she might remain, and he suffered her to cut the parts that which hold man's seed, to keep them from the detestable act. This was love in all its blood and joy. We have cast Matthias from the house. In the cradle of the roots, Matthias and the Imago left their names, and though their names were lost, they found their name-day riddles. This we recall in solution and separation, so that in the presence of the moth our memories may become our futures. Do this wisely in memory of the name and the log who gave up their past, that they might together be forgotten. And unhatched hymns attributed to Saint Lucia the Eyeless, patron of Saint Lucia the Eyeless, patron of glassworkers, and name of the hour called Meniscate. The hymns venerate every sanctioned hour, celebrating them as the sun undivided, but also suggesting that each hour may become the next, madrigad to watchman, watchman to wolf, and so on. The hymn of the phases celebrates the Meniscate from whom we do not turn, for the truth which is beauty, the beauty which is truth, and the most perfect balance between the two. The hymn of the reflections more puzzlingly celebrates the Meniscate as the sister of Janus, mother of shadow, whose visage wondrous in emptiness can reveal all truths. And in 0.9 seconds we'll be able to level up Path and Pilgrim. Another cranial tchotchke, all right. Actually, we can finally put these on their intended destination. Let's level up Path and Pilgrim. Shame on me. So I can solve this by using the occult scrap, but I feel a little foolish. The exception. Thank you very much for your continued subscription, and of course, a big milestone, 80 months in a row. I know I say this frequently, but I suspect you are probably the longest continuous sub to this channel. I do want to be a little careful on saying that, just because I know there are a couple of people who may not talk very frequently, but they do still sub. But I definitely think you are up there. It is always appreciated. Always gives me a bit of a boost. Today I was feeling a bit sick, so as always, whether it's intended or not, you do give me a pick me up on the days that I need them. Although I've had a very enjoyable stream so far. 80, almost 9 Twitch babies. But yeah, as always, I fully recognize that these are purely voluntary subs. You know, I don't do this for a living, and it can sometimes be a little hard to extract a sub when people know that, you know, people are kind of doing this for fun. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? Like, it's people go to work, they give up their time so that they can buy the things that they want, and I give this stuff away for free. But I always really do appreciate it when people go above and beyond, simply because it is, well, one, it keeps me going, but it's just a nice little show of faith or confidence, and obviously helps with the internet bill and stuff like that. But yeah, thank you very much. I've actually kind of lost track on how many of these memories I'm pulling out, but I don't think that's terrible because I'm also in a spot where I can probably get another. So I want a rose or a scale. And if I can, I'd really like to avoid giving up the pentiments and precursors. But I'll do it if I have to. All right. Gemini at volume 2 it is. So that's a Grail text. I may need to supplement my capabilities. Let's see, though. So, Arab for the start. And I think my highest Grail is probably Trides Mahaira. Yeah, so I'm one short, so we'll just use the spice scales for that, and we're good to go. Grail Birth. I can master this mystery, enough Grail to match Mystery Grail. So the intent here is going to be to level up Path and Pilgrim first, and then I might even wind up using this for Pentiments and Precursors because I believe I do intend to put that higher up on the list. Better now. It would have been nice if I started talking with Mr. Kill. So one of the first things I'm going to do is bring back the occult scrap through the to the yellowing newspaper. Obviously, we'll do that after Consider's done. Vesper Fortune! It is you, the Grail, drinking all the indecencies. Well, you and Oswin are fighting for the most devoted servant of the Grail, but I think you both are fine candidates. For those of you who are looking for new streams to check out, Vesper Fortune is a wonderful VTuber. So he's got an animated avatar, and in fact he recently upgraded it, so it's now in 3 dimensions, getting high tech. But yeah, I'm trying to remember, I think it was through Cultist Simulator that we found you, Vesper Fortune, but I know that Vesper has done Cultist Simulator, and I believe intends to do Book of Hours, but has not yet streamed it. And I will also mention, very kindly gifted a copy of Ace Attorney to the stream. Now, I have yet to play it because, of course, I've been busy running through the Book of Hours playthroughs. However, I do fully intend to play that game once I'm sort of back to a little bit more variety. And so this is an early thank you to Vesper for that, because obviously it's something that was given in the context of me sort of having a few other priorities. And so I really do, like, so obviously it's just nice to get stuff, right? But on top of that, it's something I really appreciate because, you know, there's a lot of games, there are a lot of things that will drive me to, you know, try one game over another. And so when people find something that really, like, fits the stream well, I really appreciate that, just because it is something that lets me go. It you know, it just hopefully helps me put on a better show. So, and of course, you know, he paid for it. Oh, the moon logic puzzles. All right, now I'm worried. We were talking about Day of the Tentacle earlier. There is the one puzzle in there where apparently you need to wash a carriage because... So I actually heard for those of you that like game development stories, there's a really nice podcast that Soren and Layla Johnson host called Designer Notes. And so this will be sort of the one I'm listening to right now is with Zach Barth of the Zachtronics fame, but he's done, Sid Meier, Jake Solomon, Brian Reynolds. Basically, these extended interviews, they sort of go over someone's career. They talk a little bit about game development and such. And I'm trying to remember who it was they were. Maybe it was Tim Schafer. I don't know. Anyway, so one of the people who'd worked on Day of the Tentacle, and apparently the story, if you've never played Day of the Tentacle, this won't make sense, but so maybe I should explain this first. So there is you need to basically have a thunderstorm happen in the game, and apparently one of the developers had been told that it always rains when you wash your car. And, it's kind of like if your mom tells you something that's not true to stop you from doing something that's become a habit. And like sometimes if nobody corrects it, you just go through life with this absolutely, baffling belief that was just ingrained in you as a child because, they just wanted to shut you up or to otherwise stop doing what you were doing. So apparently this guy carried on through his whole life on the belief that everyone else knew this proverb that apparently it always rained when you washed your car. So much so that when it came time to make this game, Day of the Tentacle, and you need to get Ben Franklin to have the lightning strike the kite and hit the key in that. The way you get the lightning storm is to go to the carriage and start cleaning the carriage. And that's apparently not supposed to be a hard puzzle. The only part of the puzzle is supposed to be that a carriage is a modern day car. But I had never heard of this. I've never run into anybody who has ever heard about this proverb or belief that it rains when you wash your car, except in the context of talking about Day of the Tentacle. And so, yeah, apparently there's just this completely baffling, non sequitur in Day of the Tentacle that that basically stops you from progressing in the game. Oh, that's it. You are quite genuinely the first person. Yeah, only in relation to irony. That's it. I can understand why it would be a thing or a saying. But Vesper, you are actually the very first person I've ever heard of to sort of hear that as a thing outside the context of Day of the Tentacle. So now, of course, we have to watch you play Day of the Tentacle. Did I actually do the shout? Yeah, I did. Sorry. Now we have to watch you play Day of the Tentacle so you can solve that. Okay. Time to read the paper. Investigate the object. So I realize there have been a few more digressions on non-game related topics than usual, but this tends to happen when I'm sleepy, and you're all very patient. Patient with me. It's appreciated. Well, again, we were talking about this earlier, but how with the internet, because I'm pretty sure Day of the Tentacle was made pre-internet. It references a 1-900 number in it, so. But nowadays, those adventure games are trivial because you just find any old FAQ online and you're good to go. Yeah, playing this game impatiently is definitely not the vibe. All right, so The Republic of Teeth, an eccentric political tract by Valentine de Wolf. Valentine suggests that rulers should be elected to govern by serpents, not their subjects, for the serpent, being cold-blooded in its nature, is incorruptible. Valentine's initial proposal is that a college of electors should subject themselves to the bites of venomous serpents, which he grades and details, preferring the least dangerous, and should allow the resulting deliria to guide them in their choice of people's representatives. He becomes concerned, however, by the practicalities of ensuring equal quantities of venom in each case, and gets halfway into a proposal for using birds instead in the selection process before giving up mid-sentence. Skin of Silver, the epic of the final battle of the Lionsmith with the remnant giant Antaios. As always, the Lionsmith drew his strength from metal and Antaios from stone, but the Lionsmith began to suspect that this time Antaios was drawing power from the moon. The Lionsmith beseeches the three for their assistance, and the Meniscate favors him with a skin of silver, like water, like mercury, so he too can drink power from the moon, for, she whispers, he too will one day be drawn into a perfect balance. The Carisham Portolan, so we had the gossip, but we overwrote it. A beautifully illustrated and heavily annotated portolan, a nautical atlas of ports and destinations. It quickly becomes clear that many of its destinations no longer exist, or never existed in the traditional sense, but the annotations remain fascinating. The routes to Noon, the long sanctuary across the Western Sea, may remain viable. 2 pages have been gummed together. When teased apart, they reveal a route to Ye's Behind the Wave, marked in red and gold inks and with heavily underlined warnings. Hear the final city, strike the hours, lest the earth and sky break open. The Serenity of the Black Wood, an allegorical history of the House of Leith, which it is here implied was inspired by the centipede. Serrano Blackwood is an occult alias to this day. The proverbial Footloose gathers travelers in a wood and leads them through, but abandons them part way. They find themselves beset by glorious monsters. The travelers discover they can survive if they close their eyes. They adopt a closed eye as their sign, and that they can go unnoticed if they drink from the clear, cold streams. They never forget that proverbial Footloose, the centipede, but they never forgive her either. We've read this before, but Singlefoot Songs, Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest and diplomat, writes of his time on the slopes of Huashan near the Grove of Green Immortals, but never too near. Schaller's relations with the Grove are cautious. It's a library of the tree, but under the hand of the hour named Applebright. In time, however, Schaller comes to be more sympathetic to the Applebright, which he suggests causes harm only when so invited. The Singlefoots of the title are one-horned, one-footed hill things with sweet but powerful voices, powerful enough to open the mountain. The Singlefoot sometimes trample pilgrims, sometimes heal them, sometimes coerce them to enter the mountain and become Singlefoots. Schaller explains that when he found this last becoming too tempting, he decided to return to his homeland. And The Temptations of Architecture, the antiquarian and nyctodromist Ambrose Westcott writes of the dangers of doors, with particular reference to a house in the bounds named Treowin. No doubt they have come to regret the ambitions of their winding stair. Even now in Treowin, a silver sea is unwisely visible from a rash window. Westcott explains that the wheel locks, the charge holders of Treowin, have had recourse to dramatic measures to prevent oniric encroachment, removing the entire top floor of the building. Nevertheless, he writes, the business of the Moon Hall has begun to touch the other business of the house. So sorry to rush through a couple of those, but we'd read them quite a few times before, so I didn't want to dwell too long on things that people had probably heard already. The Yellowing Newspaper. It's dated the year that Hush House was abandoned. Nothing's history when it first happens. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 memories. We needed 6, so we are good to go. When I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Improve the skill to level 7. Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it to the end of the day. I think I'm probably going to want to wrap it up reasonably soon. But what I will do is I'll at least queue up So what I want to do here is I want to read any of the books that Mr. Kill can't give me. So Stolen Secrets. Well, first of all, we already have one that doesn't help me right now. But the Locksmith's Dream and Cursus for the Confounding Parable. Unhatched Hymns. Trying to remember. Oh, yeah, Temptations of Architecture for sure. I think that might be it. Yeah, Gossip we can get. Contradiction doesn't help me. Salt doesn't help me. It's Rose and Scale that I need. So all these remaining ones are ones that I might get from Mr. Kill. So I think what I'll do is I will talk with Mr. Kill until we are finished reading the book. Actually, it's just another minute. I don't know. I'll still try and get what I can from Mr. Kill. But what we should have is one more memory after. So if it's Pentaments and Precursors, that's a Scale and Grail. So I'm just catching up with my my notes here. So our original goal here was Stone Stories, which was Scale and Nectar. Tradesma Hira, which would just need one Grail and Moon. Edicts Inviolable, which would need... Oh, this is interesting. So out of this list that I was looking for, it's actually the Tradesma Hira is the only one that'll use those aspects that I need. So I'm going to take a minute here and see what Pentaments and Precursors wants. So it looks like I was going to take that to level 7. So I think what I'll do... I'll put that on a to-do. So the reason why I'm just writing a note for myself here is that I'm using Pentaments and Precursors right now at the Moor. So apparently I'm eventually going to want to bring this up to level 7. So and that's fine. Obviously I'm going to need 5 of the Grail and Scale though. So I figure at the base as a basic priority, seeing as I don't have anything else that needs Scale anymore, I can at least put one of the Pentaments and Precursors towards leveling up Path and Pilgrim. Then I can use... I do have the option of leveling up Tradesma Hira, and I normally would do that because I think we had a bit of a surplus in some of the other texts. I may have already exhausted that, though. I should double check. Yeah, maybe I did already get rid of it. But that's a fair... Like, the Moon stuff is pretty easy for us to get. Moon and Grail are not that hard to get a hold of. So I wanted... I wanted to keep the option open, but in this case here, I think probably it's better for me to just wait until I have a surplus of a Moon thing. So, for instance, Deeds of the Scarred Captain would provide that for me. And so, as a result, because I've sort of exhausted my supply of Scale, I don't think it would be a bad idea for me to invest a little bit earlier in Pentaments and Precursors just to make my life a little bit easier. Still, we have a ton of books here, right? So we've got these ones and then everything. Actually, I guess I can move one of these up. So Focus of Amber. Well, actually, if that's a 16, we should be moving that to the appropriate side. Okay. The big blue business. There we go. I think I used to have a couple of other books that were sitting around for shelving. In terms of to-dos, so I want to try and clear out these 3 and put them on proper shelves at some point. I think we have another shelf that's like that too. I know we've got a bit of a weird breakup with these, but yeah. Once I clear this one out, I can sort of decide which of these needs 2 shelves. And I figure, so something like this with patterns, I think if we can maybe do something like move Foresight into taking 2 of these, maybe patterns can just, take a shelf like this, take a shelf like this. I don't know. I feel like there's a couple of ways that we can sort of generally free up space in the library. And then, at some point I'll also probably clear out a room. So the Vestibulum Transitus would be a good place to actually start storing books again. Right now this has been my overflow. But, at some point I do actually need to either make use of these things or move on. But all of that will be handled in a future episode. So the urge to stick all the books in rooms where they aesthetically match is strong. Well, again, for me, I've been focusing on sorting them by memory. But even then, like the game definitely feels like this is a good sort of core for the library, but the game definitely throws more at you than can be handled by these. So, and I will definitely say since House of Light came in, I've actually found it a bit more difficult to try and shelve everything, just because, again, I have all of these, like all of the rooms where I can host a salon, I'm basically piling it full of food. And because I have the option of cooking, I'm just keeping all of the shelves with more and more stuff so that I can have the option to cook it when the time comes. And so as a result, I've been going in deeper with the crafting material, but in the end, this has resulted in a very crowded hush house, just sort of borderline hoarding, I guess. Anyways, sorry, I'm rambling and I'm quite tired. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you everybody for watching. I just wanted to try and get some ideas in terms of what the next couple of weeks are going to look like, because there's going to be a few more gaps in the schedule than I would normally like. So Friday I will be streaming. So this coming Friday I will be returning to this save and continuing to make progress, leveling up the different skills that I want. But it is Remembrance Day in Canada on the 11th. So that is, it depends on where you work, but for me, that is a day that I get off work. Obviously, I'll be attending a ceremony, but that's not going to take the whole day. But I will, in the spirit of making sure that I don't get burned out, the thing that we talked about earlier, I definitely want to make sure that I like, if I'm not working on that day, I don't want to have an unofficial second job, which is streaming. So, but what this does do is it does have the somewhat awkward timing in the sense that I'll miss the Monday on the 11th, but I'm actually also going to wind up missing the 18th because I'm actually going to be out of my apartment at that time on a prior commitment. And then finally on the 20th, so the following Wednesday, that is actually the local game dev meetup. So the third Wednesday of every month is one that I don't stream because I'm going to be at that local meetup. But as it happens, we have the holiday, we have a prior commitment where I'm not going to be available to stream, at least at any meaningful hour. Like, I figure if I start the stream at 1 o'clock in the morning, that's going to leave me really tired, and the same people aren't going to be able to watch. So there's just no point in starting. So with that in mind, next week, the Monday's off. The following week, the Monday and Wednesday is off. And then I think that takes us through the rest of November. And then, of course, December, it's pretty obvious what the what the holiday for that is, but that does fall on a Wednesday. However, I will say that I think I will I traditionally on Christmas I have streamed, and it's because I know there are some people who don't have anything to do for the Christmas, and traditionally it's been nice to just be able to have, be an unofficial Yule log or something. But we'll sort out the rest of that. The big one right now is I just wanted to let people know Monday the 11th, Monday the 18th, and Wednesday the 20th are days that I won't be streaming. Those are intended but still regretted absences. Yeah, so the year before we read a Christmas Carol. I really liked that. And the year following, we read the Sherlock Holmes story, The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, which is the Christmas special for Sherlock Holmes. I liked it. I don't think I'd read that one before, or if I had, didn't remember it. Okay, so sadly nobody's streaming Book of Hours. Doesn't look like anybody's on Cultist Simulator either. So I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Will Shand. I noticed that Will has been ending his streams a little earlier than I was used to. But it's always nice to host him. He's got a very unique channel. I think some of you will really like it. So he's done a few different things, but one his latest his kind of latest bit has been he does strange and scary games. So he streams in the games and demos corner, and what he tends to do, he's almost sort of looking at like the very left-hand side of the distribution for quality game. Like sometimes it will be sometimes it's going to be like really it's going to be like very janky, very strange horror games. But anyways, he's somebody I've met in Vancouver, somebody I've hung out with a little bit. And I think he's got a really unique stream that I think some of you may enjoy. So I hope you have a good time in Will's channel. I'm gonna stop rambling. Hopefully he will still be. Oh, okay. Hopefully he'll still be streaming. But I will see hopefully some of you on Friday, and if not, have a lovely evening, and we'll see you next time.